Chapter 3103. Since it had already happened and so many people had seen it, they thought that if they didn't do anything and suppressed it, others would stop gossiping and talking about it. What else could they talk about if they didn't talk about these things? Any topic that involved color was the most explosive. So, since everyone was going to talk about it, why should she let herself be wronged? The worst outcome would be losing a man. It was just an extra pound of flesh. It wasn't that big of a deal. Having a man meant having a backbone, even if this backbone was a piece of trash. They were clearly living together, but in the end, it was worse than being a widow or a divorced single parent. Why did she jump into it even though she knew it was a trap? She actually didn't want to come out after jumping in. This way, she would still be a woman wanted by a man. If she left this man, no one would want her. Her daughter suddenly wanted a divorce. This made it difficult for Su Feng to answer. After a while, she said, "Jing Jing, let mom think about this. Let's settle this peacefully first." Ning Shu only made an "oh" sound and said to her, "You go back and rest first. You don't have to stay here. Help me bring food when you come." "Thank you." Su Feng nodded. "Why are you thanking mom? You're my daughter." Yes, she was a good mother. Su Feng was quite contradictory. In some aspects, she did seem to dote on her daughter. But in other aspects, she was probably dragging a burden down. It wouldn't be good for her to get married. Moreover, she had divorced twice. She would be laughed at again. Ning Shu used her uninjured hand to pull the blanket. She had slept on her side. Her back and spine had been cut. If it had been a little more dangerous, she would probably have been paralyzed. Her spine was broken. After careful calculation, there were 4 wounds on her body. The client had been slashed 14 times before dying. Ning Shu felt that if she had come a little later, even if she had survived, she might have been a cripple. Life was a tragedy in capital letters. Ning Shu peacefully recuperated. After she recovered, she would fight again. At the same time, she cultivated. She felt that she hadn't cultivated a peerless martial art in a long time. There was no spirit energy in the hospital. Instead, it was filled with the aura of decay and death. Death. It was a little familiar. Ning Shu felt that death wasn't so scary. No matter what happened now, she could use her strength to fight. "I'm not even afraid of death, so what's there to be afraid of?" Without spiritual energy, Ning Shu could only absorb other types of energy, such as the power of the fiery sun. However, it wasn't of much help in healing injuries. The power of the sun flame was more violent and its attack power was strong. It didn't have the gentleness of spiritual energy and could heal injuries. There were 2 men on the other side. As a child, she was no match for them in terms of combat power. In addition, there was also Su Feng, whose stance was constantly wavering. As a child, she definitely wouldn't be able to win. Children were immoral and needed a guardian for everything they did. If Su Feng disagreed, no matter how many plans she had, they would all go down the drain. Ning Shu pondered in his heart. Su Feng touched Ning Shu's face and sighed. She said to Ning Shu, "Have a good rest. Don't think too much. Mom is here." Ning Shu nodded and watched as Su Feng opened the door and left. After stuffing a fasting pill into his mouth, he felt full, and his body felt much more energetic. It was just that his wound hurt. When he got up to go to the toilet, it affected his wound. It hurt so much that Ning Shu grimaced in pain. He should get the doctor to give him some painkillers. Right now, Ning Shu hated pain and other people hurting his face the most. A policeman came to question him. He sat by the bed and asked Ning Shu some questions. For example, what had happened? Ning Shu honestly told him about the first, second, and third times that Wang Zhiyong had violated her, including the details of how he had touched her body and how she had felt. He also told him what Wang Jiwen had said. Then, he was locked in the house by his biological father and hacked. He showed his wound and said that he was almost crippled. The policeman originally thought that the child would cry, but the other party told it in such detail. Instead, it made the policeman's face turn red. It was too detailed. Especially on the face of a young girl, he said something that would make people embarrassed. He coughed and said, "Your stepfather has already written a letter of guarantee. Your mother has already signed the statement." Ning Shu asked, "What about my father?" "He hurt me." Ning Shu wasn't surprised that Su Feng did this. But Li Jianming had obviously attempted murder and he didn't think that he was in the wrong. How could he just let it go like that? Ning Shu tilted his head and looked at the policeman. He asked with a confused face, "Even minors who commit crimes are protected. Why didn't I commit a crime and was hurt? Why didn't you protect me? I want to apply for protection. I am a victim. My mother's signature can't be my will. When I go back, my stepfather will still violate me. My biological father will still want to kill me. He wants to purify the world and eliminate this dirty thing like me." Ning Shu's face was full of grievance, fear, and despair. With so many emotions mixed on his face, it made Ning Shu's face contort. He asked, "Will there be policemen living in our house? I am very scared. I am so scared that I want to climb upstairs and jump down. As long as you jump down, you won't encounter these things." Ning Shu cried until a bubble came out of his nose. He quickly sniffed it back. The policeman took a tissue and handed it to Ning Shu. "Don't cry. Don't cry." Ning Shu grabbed the policeman's hand. "Then what should I do? Both fathers will take revenge on me. I don't have long to live. Why don't I just jump down?" The two policemen looked at each other. This matter was not easy to solve. They also knew that what this girl said was true. Even if the police station and the biological father said that he was not in the wrong, he still didn't think that he was in the wrong. He felt that his daughter was dirty. Ning Shu felt that if Li Jianming's son was raped by a chicken, he definitely wouldn't kill his son. Instead, he would fight with Wang Jiong. Eliminating the dirty daughter was enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Ning Shu expressed his admiration. He had never seen such an operation. No, there were many such operations. There were many women in pig cages. The hero saved the beauty, killed the beauty, and then got together with the bully who bullied the beauty. They held hands and were happy. Then this kind of action was called the hero saving the beauty. Wasn't it ridiculous? There were thousands of principles in the world. Someone like this was really speechless. Ning Shu was crying very sadly. Her voice was sobbing, low and depressed. People who passed by the ward thought that there was a ghost. The policeman was also helpless. He said, "But your guardian has already signed." Ning Shu cried and said, "It's okay. I know that uncles are in a difficult position. I hope that the next time we meet, you won't see my corpse. Can you give me a special treatment? I wrote a love letter. I already have my own thoughts. I can handle things." Ning Shu wiped his tears. "I'm underage. There is a law protecting underage children." Chapter 3104. Minors have the right to survival, development, protection, participation, and other rights. They should be given special and priority protection according to the physical and mental development characteristics of minors to ensure that minors' legal rights are not violated. "Uncle, my life is now threatened. I'm scared, very scared," Ning Shu said as his body trembled. "If your guardian doesn't agree, this matter can't be carried out. It's okay, I can make my own decisions. My mother is an adult and has many concerns. I'm a child, I can't think so far ahead. I don't want to die. I can seek legal help, can't I?" Ning Shu looked at the police with tears in his eyes. How should he put it? It couldn't be, right? They had already mentioned the protection of minors. The most difficult thing to deal with was this little girl. If he refuted, wouldn't he be saying that the law was useless? Then write a love letter, we'll take it to the police station to deal with it. There will be a lot of gossip when the time comes. There would definitely be a lot of people talking about it. Even if it's going to be reported, won't they censor me? Ning Shu asked. Even criminals would be censored when they were reported. She was a victim, a girl at that. Shouldn't she censor her face too? Police, children were not to be trifled with, not to be trifled with. When the police left, Ning Shu said, "Uncles, please detain them properly. Once they are released, they will definitely come to the hospital. They will definitely kill me. Police. Don't worry, we will detain them first." Ning Shu smiled at the police with snot and tears on his face. Thank you. If this matter was not handled locally, then it could only be handled in another place. Children had no human rights and no dignity. Even if there was anything, it was up to the guardian. Ning Shu slowly lay down. Damn, it hurt. Women had to be kind and elegant, but they also had to have a sharp edge and a sharp edge. Without a sharp edge and a sharp edge, kindness was not kindness. If they gave in now, they would be kindness. Ning Shu sneered. Stop joking. They had different views. How could they expect the two fathers to know their mistakes and change? No, they thought that they were not wrong. Not only were they not wrong, but they had also contributed. Not only did they get rid of a dirty thing, they also saved the judge some trouble. At least they had learned some witchcraft laws, but he didn't know if they could be used. Ning Shu was lying on the hospital bed, cursing the two of them under her breath. He cursed Wang Zhiyong's prostatitis, causing him to die of pain when he went to the toilet, and then radiating to his balls. He cursed Li Jianming's knife to fall on the back of his foot. Ning Shu could not use the power of laws, so he could only curse a few small things. As for whether or not it would be of any use, that was not certain. It was a pity that the law of prophecy was wasted. Perhaps with the addition of prophecy, it might have been effective. The next day, Su Feng went to the hospital and brought some food. Ning Shu angrily asked, "I went to the police station and heard that you wrote a love letter. Jing Jing, what do you want? An arm can't win against a thigh. We're all family." Su Feng was worried sick. She looked like she was about to cry. She couldn't help but complain, "Why are you so disobedient?" Ning Shu asked, "Why not? With the help of the law and free lawyers, it's just a waste of time." Both sides had the same status, so the outcome was already very clear. Others wouldn't be touched if she still wronged herself like this. Ning Shu asked, "What if Dad kills me when we go back? How can that be? They should know that they were wrong." Ning Shu was speechless. How stupid was it to put her life in the hands of others? Did she hope that the other party would be merciful and let her go? Or did she let the other party violate her and use love to influence her stepfather? Did she stretch her neck and let her biological father kill her? Ning Shu really wanted to tell Su Feng that this was impossible, impossible. If she didn't resist, she would be bullied to death. What was the use of crying at that time? It was useless to cry. She could only risk her life. If she was going to die anyway, she would rather drag the other party down with her. The blame on Su Feng's face made Ning Shu shut up. He couldn't wake up a person who was pretending to be asleep, so he didn't want to waste his saliva. Su Feng was hoping for a fluke. Maybe it would pass just like this. Maybe she would be safe and happy in the future. There was no benefit in making a scene. This marriage might collapse. Su Feng might not be able to accept another divorce. What a tough life. Su Feng wiped her tears as she scooped rice for Ning Shu and fed it to her. This made Ning Shu feel rather helpless. It wasn't bad for her daughter, but it was good. She chose to smooth things over on this matter. She didn't dare to take a step forward. She was surrounded by dog poop. Perhaps she was used to it and was used to it. She couldn't recognize the stench after smelling it for a long time. Mom, this matter won't end like this. Since we've already made a scene, the two fathers will think that we provoked them. Since we've already done it, we should do it thoroughly. I need your support. In the future, I'll take care of you when you're old and let you live a comfortable life. Without a father, there won't be a man. The two of us can live a comfortable life. We can spend the money we earn ourselves. We can buy whatever we want. Uncle won't use the money to gamble. We can do whatever we want. Isn't this kind of life good? Even if it was a little strange, it was a comfortable life. Su Feng shook her head. You're still young. Some things aren't that simple. Ning Shu asked, how complicated can it be? It was just a matter of whether she was willing to do it or not. Fear, panic. Mom, Dad wants to kill me now. Can you protect me? Ning Shu asked. Su Feng had been outside the door before. Su Feng couldn't do anything about what happened inside. Sometimes, the body was just so magical. It felt like Su Feng was a trash receptacle. The men she met were either trash or cheap. It made people sink into a swamp where they couldn't move. At this time, it was time to fight. Then, will you send your father and uncle to the classroom? Su Feng asked. When they come out, won't it be the same? Ning Shu said, when they come out, I'll be all grown up. And it's not certain if they can find me. The matter now hadn't been settled, yet she was still worried about the future. If it wasn't settled, there would be no future. Worrying about the future now was pointless. Ning Shu grabbed Su Feng's hand and said seriously, Mom, believe me. What haven't I experienced before? Even after something like this happened, I can still calm down. What I need to do now is to not let this happen to me again. The client was a minor. This identity was a restriction. If the client was an adult, she could do whatever she wanted. It was also okay to leave this place. Try to win Su Feng over to his side. If Su Feng was still like this, Ning Shu would give up and do his own thing. He didn't need to worry about her. Even if he didn't have the money to find a lawyer, he had the support of a lawyer. If he won the case, he had to make the other party pay. Compensation for psychological damage was a must. Chapter 3105. Ning Shu said everything she wanted to say, but Su Feng just kept feeding her and didn't say anything. The food didn't taste very good, and Ning Shu had already eaten the fasting pill, so she didn't want to eat anymore. She shook her head and said, I don't want to eat anymore. Is it not to your taste? What do you want to eat? I'll make it for you. What do you want to eat? Su Feng stopped feeding her. Ning Shu looked at Su Feng and asked, Mom, what do you think? Su Feng was a little embarrassed, and she didn't even dare to look into Ning Shu's eyes. Since the incident, her daughter hadn't cried, made a fuss, or panicked, but she had her own ideas, which made Su Feng feel at a loss. Her eyes flickered, and she said to Ning Shu, Jing Jing, it's not that simple. Even if you want to get a divorce, you have to wait until this incident is over. Why do you have to wait until this incident is over? Just do it together. You can't bear to leave him. Didn't you say that you got married for me? You were afraid that I wouldn't have a father. Now I don't want a father. Father hurt me so much, and I want you to leave him. Are you willing to leave him for me? Since you got married for the child, you should get a divorce for the child, okay? You said it was for the child. Su Feng looked a little embarrassed. Jing Jing, you might not know about adult matters. It's not as simple as getting married and getting a divorce. Wasn't marriage so easy? Finding a man to live with, then getting a divorce was just packing up and leaving. Moreover, there was no gold or silver mine waiting to be divided at home. It could be said that there was nothing at home. Ning Shu said, since mom doesn't want to get a divorce, then forget it. Let's not get a divorce. Ning Shu's sudden change surprised Su Feng. It wasn't that she didn't want to get a divorce, but they had just gotten married. If they got a divorce again, they would be laughed at. If they got a divorce and got married again, it would be the third marriage. It's okay. We won't live with uncle anyway, Ning Shu said. Su Feng was confused and asked, why? Ning Shu said, uncle has already committed the crime of raping a woman. Whether I'm willing or not, he has to go to jail. While he's in jail, we'll live our own lives. Su Feng was shocked. She didn't know what was going on and asked in a panic, do I have to go to jail? She thought that Wang Zhiyong would be fine after writing the guarantee, but she didn't expect that he would still go to jail. Seeing her daughter staring at her, Su Feng suppressed the complicated feelings in her heart and muttered, how could this be? So, whether he admits his mistake or not, and whether he writes a guarantee or not, he has to go to jail. And we. Ning Shu pointed at Su Feng and himself with his uninjured hand. We both offended Dad and Uncle. If she came forward, the nature of this matter would become even worse. Perhaps he would be locked up for 5 or 6 years. If she came forward, the punishment would be increased according to the situation. Treating a child like this, whether it was raping her or trying to kill her, such a crazy person, if he didn't increase his sentence, would it be a lighter sentence? It wasn't as simple as just letting them go to jail. Su Feng's face was pale, and she asked Ning Shu in a daze, can't we settle this privately? The people here didn't have a strong sense of the law, and the place was a bit remote. They were so ignorant that they could objectify women like this. They were clearly killing people, clearly hurting a person, but they could be so righteous and not feel that they were wrong. It was so terrible. What did it matter if he smashed or broke something when he was unhappy about it? Women were just things. Of course, it could be settled privately, and these two people wouldn't even be punished. This was a family matter and everything could be settled. But Ning Shu didn't want to. Why should she be so magnanimous when others hurt her? Why should she write a petition to prove that these people didn't hurt her? Sorry, I can't write, my hand is lame. Su Feng carried the thermos, looked at the calm Ning Shu, and finally sighed. Ning Shu almost said with a smile, Mom, you offended 2 men. These 2 men won't let you and me go. Being locked up for a year was a grudge, and being locked up for 10 years was also a grudge. Moreover, they were imprisoned because of a woman, which was enough to make Li Jianming and Wang Zhiyong bear a grudge. Su Feng's hand loosened, and the thermos fell to the ground. The sound was like hitting a person's heart, and Su Feng was startled. Seeing Su Feng's pale face, Ning Shu said, Mom, don't be afraid. Even if the 2 fathers are really released from prison and want to kill us, I will die with you. Su Feng squatted down to pick up the thermos, and her hands were shaking. She knew her ex-husband too well. He could even kill his own daughter. She was just an ex-wife, and he would definitely kill her out of anger. Li Jianming was very grumpy. If he wasn't grumpy, he wouldn't have cut people with a knife. Ning Shu watched Su Feng leave and curled his lips. Su Feng's heart was still with the 2 men. Although it wasn't necessarily with her ex-husband, she was definitely with her current husband and Wang Zhiyong. He didn't know what was good about Wang Zhiyong. He was simply a scum with a bad character. Raping his stepdaughter, to a certain extent, was also a betrayal of Su Feng. Su Feng didn't even find Wang Zhiyong to make trouble. Ning Shu felt that the lying skills of men didn't change at all. Since ancient times, there were only a few excuses. She seduced me. I just made a mistake that all men in the world would make. Drinking alcohol. As a person who knew a little about medicine, drinking alcohol was simply questioning medicine. After drinking alcohol, the hardness of the little brother was simply not good. Drinking alcohol was just an excuse. An old excuse that couldn't keep up with the rapidly evolving women. Be a little more careful, and at least keep up with the pace of the times. Of course, there were also many women who believed in these excuses. Su Feng went to the police station and consulted with the police about this matter. The police said that this was a criminal case. Wang Zhiyong was guilty of rape, and Li Jianming was guilty of intentional murder, although it was an attempted murder. Su Feng walked out of the police station with a light foot and a heavy foot. She even went to see her ex-husband and husband in the detention center. The two men were furious. They asked Su Feng not to let them go to jail no matter what. They also asked Li Jing to deny that they did these things to her. Wang Zhiyong grabbed the bars and shouted to Su Feng, "I didn't do those things to her. If I'm arrested and sent to jail, you'll be a widow and an orphan. How are you going to live? I'll treat you and Jing Jing well in the future." Wang Zhiyong gritted his teeth as he spoke. If he wasn't afraid of going to jail, he wouldn't have said such things. Li Jianming also promised, "I won't care about her in the future. She can sleep with whoever she wants." Hearing Li Jianming's tone, there was disdain and displeasure. Chapter 3106. Wang Zhiyong probably felt embarrassed that he was forced to admit his mistake. He didn't feel that he was in the wrong. Su Feng was uneasy. Her scalp was numb and she was at a loss. Her mind was in a mess. She didn't know how to solve this problem. How to solve it perfectly. Her heart ached for her daughter, but she didn't want to see the two of them being sent to jail. Why did this happen? To Su Feng, it was like an earthquake in her life. It was like a tsunami that destroyed her peaceful and blissful life. She was afraid and wanted to escape. Talk to Jing Jing properly. This isn't good for anyone. Wang Zhiyong said to Su Feng, "I didn't do that to Jing Jing. When the time comes, let her tell the police that this is all a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Su Feng, I'll be good to you and Jing Jing in the future. If I really go to work and leave you two as orphans and widows, I'll feel terrible." Wang Zhiyong's tone was sincere. "I really know my mistake. I really know my mistake." Su Feng was doubtful. "Really?" Wang Zhiyong quickly nodded. "Really, really." Su Feng left the police station. She wanted to talk to her daughter about this, but she couldn't face her daughter. Her daughter's gaze made her feel uncomfortable and embarrassed. It was as if everything in her heart was exposed under the sun. She really loved Jing Jing. She did all this to give Jing Jing a stable life. If things got out of hand, Jing Jing was still a child. What would she do if she had to face the gossip around her? Jing Jing still had to get married and have children in the future. Her life couldn't be ruined like this. What if Jing Jing couldn't get married in the future? Her life would be ruined. Although Su Feng was mentally preparing herself, she didn't dare to face her daughter. On the other hand, Ning Shu welcomed a few groups of relatives. Some were from his grandmother's side, some were from his biological grandmother's side, and some were from Wang Zhiyong's parents. His grandmother's side said, "What are you doing? Are you making your mother get a divorce again? Do you know that if your mother gets a divorce again, she won't be able to get married? You have to think about your mother. Furthermore, something like this has happened. She can't wait to cover it up. You're so thick-skinned. It's your mother's second marriage. It's hard for other people to deal with your mother. Her biological grandmother's house, which was also Li Jianming's house. You wretched girl, you want to send your biological father to prison? He raised you up and gave you a life. Is this how you repay your father? How can you be so unfilial? You've completely disgraced the Li family. Wherever you go, people will criticize you. Who in the world would send their own father to the servants' quarters? Wang Zhiyong's family, when your mother married into the Wang family, she had to drag you down with her. You didn't eat enough and wear enough clothes. If my Zhiyong didn't take you and your mother in, I don't know what kind of life you and your mother would be living. Ning Shu, living a good life. Your Wang Zhiyong is amazing. He's at the mahjong table every day and even sends food to him. A group of people crowded in the ward, buzzing noisily as they surrounded the bed. Ning Shu used the blanket to wipe his face. His face was splashed with a lot of saliva. It stinks. I don't care what you say. I won't move. I'll just close my eyes and rest. When Su Feng arrived at the hospital, she saw so many people. Her mother's family and her two husbands' families were all there. Her heart trembled. Seeing a new target, these people turned their attention to Su Feng. They surrounded Su Feng and talked to her one after another. Moreover, they said words that pierced her heart. Su Feng's face was extremely pale and she was terrified. Everyone put their hands on their hips and criticized Su Feng, who was in the middle. Su Feng could only deal with these people and promised them according to their wishes. Only after promising that the two men wouldn't go to jail and that nothing would happen to them did these people leave satisfied. They weren't here to visit the patient. They didn't even bring any fruit. The moment they came, they made a lot of noise. Everyone disapproved of the two men going to jail. Once they left, Su Feng let out a long breath. She was very dispirited. Ning Shu forced a smile and said, "Jing Jing, look. Everyone disagrees." Ning Shu said indifferently, "What does it have to do with me whether they agree or not? It wasn't like they were the ones who were raped." Su Feng choked. After a while, she said, "Jing Jing, your uncle Wang said that he will treat you well in the future. Your father won't care about you anymore." Ning Shu said, "Oh. What do you need me to do?" Su Feng also knew that what she said was wrong, but she still told Ning Shu what Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming said in the detention center. Instead of causing trouble for everyone, it's better to take a step back. It's not that I want you to suffer for nothing, but that your uncle Wang will treat you better. Not to mention that Su Feng wasn't smart, ordinary people were smart. Instead of causing trouble, it was better to get some benefits from it and not be laughed at. Even if they were laughed at, their lives would return to the past. Ning Shu looked at Su Feng. "What if he assaults me again?" "No, he won't dare. After this incident, he definitely won't do it again." "What if Dad wants to kill me?" Ning Shu asked. "He won't, Jing Jing. Mom will protect you." "Ning Shu, can you be with me every day?" Inseparable. With those men's morals, could she believe their words? She was showing weakness now because she didn't want to go to jail. That was just a compromise. How could Su Feng believe it? In order to make Su Feng believe it, she had to pay with her life. When she died, Su Feng would naturally believe it. But by then, everyone would be dead. Ning Shu glanced at Su Feng and said, "I'm going to sleep. You can leave first." She wouldn't say anything useless to Su Feng anymore. Su Feng wouldn't listen to her. Jing Jing. Su Feng looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu just said, "Mom, I'm in pain. I want to sleep. Can you not disturb me?" She didn't agree or disagree. She just kept silent, which made Su Feng's heart uneasy. "Jing Jing, just now your grandma and grandma came over to talk," Su Feng shouted. "Ning Shu, I already said that I'm going to sleep. Is there anything else?" "Then have a good rest. What do you want to eat?" "Mom will make it for you," Su Feng asked. Ning Shu said lightly, "It's up to you." She wasn't hungry. She didn't want to eat at all. Especially when there was a sense of bad motherly love in it. She couldn't say that Su Feng was wrong, but from the standpoint of the client, she really felt wronged. She was hurt. People all over the world were asking her to forgive the person who hurt her. And the person who hurt her might hurt her again in the future. If these people blocked for her in the future and replaced her when she was raped, she would forgive them. Chapter 3107. Otherwise, the price of forgiveness would be too high. With just a few words from these people, she would have to bear all the risks. And it was simply incredible. And if she forgave them, when she returned home in the future, she would not have to face these people's heartache and gratitude. Instead, she would have to face the ridicule and disdain of these people. So, forgive your numbness. Since it was already like this, no one would have a good life. There was no reason for one person to be so miserable. As for whether it would be ruined or not, that would depend on one's mentality. I'm not afraid of men not wanting me. Whether I'm dirty or not, whether I was raped or not, it's none of your business. I don't accept your criticism. I'm not fucking married to you. What right do you have to criticize me? As for whether they feel inferior or not, the ones who feel inferior and ashamed should be those beasts. After being bitten by a dog, do you still have to think about it for the rest of your life? Whether my life is ruined or not, that's my own business. What does it have to do with you? Ning Shu slept well every day, took medicine well, and recuperated well. He tried to recover as soon as possible. After setting up a spirit-gathering formation, he did not absorb much spirit energy. There was only a strand of spirit energy every few days. It was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood for the recovery of his wounds. At least there was some spirit energy. Su Feng would send 2 meals a day. Because of this incident, she could not go to work. If she was not rushing to the hospital, she would be going to the police station. Su Feng had lost a lot of weight and her face was extremely sallow. It seemed that she had been under too much pressure during this period. Even though she was rushing to and fro, there was still no progress. Ning Shu did not relent. Meanwhile, in the detention center, 2 men were waiting for Su Feng. After leaving the ward, Su Feng squatted in the corridor and sobbed. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She lamented her hard life. Why was her life so hard? Did she not have the right to be happy? After marrying Li Jianming, she did not have a son. Li Jianming beat and scolded her. After divorcing, she married Wang Zhiyong with her daughter. Although Wang Zhiyong was a bit lazy and loved to play mahjong, he would not beat her for no reason. Sometimes, he would even say a few nice words to warm her heart. She only needed a man to accompany her and provide her with spiritual support. That was enough. Compared to Li Jianming, Wang Zhiyong was not bad. Su Feng compared Wang Zhiyong among the scumbags and felt that Wang Zhiyong was a slightly better scumbag. Ning Shu looked at Su Feng and asked, "Mom, I'll support you in your old age. When I grow up and earn money, I'll take good care of you. I can do whatever a man can do. If you're really afraid of not having a man, you can find a boyfriend. If we're not suitable for each other, we can break up. Isn't that great? There's no need for a divorce." Ning Shu was just short of directly saying that if she needed a man, then she could just find a man to comfort her. If they were not suitable for each other, then they could separate and have boyfriends of equal status. If she were to say it out loud, Su Feng would probably label her with a shocking label. Su Feng was a traditional woman. Su Feng's tears immediately flowed out. She hugged Ning Shu and cried, saying how hard their lives were. "Hee, what fate." Ning Shu said, "Are you going to divorce Uncle Wang or not?" Ning Shu no longer wanted to entangle with Su Feng. She directly asked, if she chose Wang Zhiyong, she would give up Su Feng. If Su Feng chose them, they could rely on each other and lead a good life. Now, Su Feng was in so much pain because she wanted to choose both sides. Su Feng said, "Jing Jing." Ning Shu asked, "Are you going to divorce?" Su Feng took a deep breath. "I'm not going to divorce." "Jing Jing, you have to think about Mom." Ning Shu was really confused. She had already said that when the matter was resolved, she would leave with Su Feng and start a new life. Living anywhere was still living. Why did she have to stay here? Why couldn't Su Feng's brain work? Even if she wanted a man, there were plenty of men. She could just find another man somewhere else. Ning Shu looked at Su Feng in confusion. Could it be that Su Feng truly loved Wang Zhiyong? For a woman to give her heart out, what else could it be other than love? Ning Shu shivered deeply. What a scary feeling of being touched. She even wanted to be touched with him. Should they reform Wang Zhiyong together? Then, they would be happy together and let Wang Zhiyong do whatever he wanted to her. Ning Shu sneered. Reform? Sorry, she wouldn't. She would only cremate him. She didn't have such sentiments. She wanted to save the world and reform everyone in the world. She could become Buddha by putting down the butcher's knife. Look, she was so kind to the evil and so evil to the good. Was this fair to the kind? Ning Shu no longer had any hope for Su Feng. What Su Feng was doing now was nothing more than a little love for the client, but this love was obviously insignificant. The client's age was really making him bald. A 12-year-old child without a guardian was an orphan. If he dragged Su Feng to live with him, at least he would have a guardian and not an orphan. But Su Feng had too many things that she couldn't let go of. She wouldn't leave this place. Was she going to make the client an orphan? However, the person who had entrusted the mission was still here. Could he really survive the rumors and slanders? Furthermore, he might even be killed by Li Jianming. After all, Li Jianming was the messenger of justice. Ning Shu sighed. It seemed that it was time to apply for a new identity. Usually, when such a situation happened, the country would give the client some protection and change their identity. Usually, when the client changed their identity, they would be cut off from their previous family. They would no longer be Su Feng's child. Li Jianming would also no longer be her father. She should also apologize to Su Feng. No matter how much she couldn't bear to leave Wang Zhiyong still had to stay in jail. She was alone and lonely. It had been hard on her. But after doing such a thing, how could Su Feng still stay in the Wang family and Wang Zhiyong's family not vent their anger on her? It was impossible to have the best of both worlds. Ning Shu felt that as long as she did things her way, she would cut off Su Feng's path. Su Feng, who had no other path, would follow her. She wanted to work together with her daughter. But now, there was no need to be polite. In the eyes of others, she and Su Feng were one. Whatever she did, Su Feng would do. After she did what she did, it would be impossible for Su Feng to stay in this place. During this period, the police came a few times to collect documents. Lawyers also came. The legal aid lawyers came to understand the situation from Ning Shu. Ning Shu had been a lawyer before. She knew she had to explain everything to the lawyers. This way, when she went to court, she would have a higher chance of winning. The injuries on her body were checked, and she even did a test. The report showed that she was no longer a virgin. Ning Shu was glad that the client was not on her period. If not, she would be pregnant. A 12-year-old child was pregnant. This was simply a tragedy. These documents were all prepared and could be used as evidence in court. Chapter 3108. Li Jianming and Wang Zhiyong didn't have any background, so they weren't able to play with the law and hire a team of lawyers. Therefore, these two people were definitely going to be lawyers. But she couldn't just let them go to jail. She had to let people know that these two people were beasts. If they were beasts, they would kill her in the future. It was also convenient to apply for a new identity. When Su Feng saw the lawyer, she was extremely shocked. She quickly asked Ning Shu, "Who is this? A lawyer?" "Jing, what do you want to do?" Ning Shu said, "I'm a victim. I have to go to court. No matter what the situation is, I have to explain it clearly. But why do you need a lawyer? Jing Jing, our family has no money. We can't afford a lawyer, Su Feng said. It's a lawyer from legal aid. It doesn't cost much, Ning Shu said calmly. You. Su Feng was very anxious. What do you want to do? Whatever you want me to say, I will say it in court. Don't worry, Ning Shu said. Su Feng was very surprised. Really, Jing Jing? Don't call me Jing Jing. I really want to be Jing Jing right now. On the day of the trial, Ning Shu went to the court with injuries all over her body. When it was her turn, Ning Shu used half a bottle of eye drops. Her tears flowed down like water. The two men stood at the side and glared at Ning Shu to warn her. Ning Shu walked slowly. She had to rest for a while after every step. She wore a mask to cover her face. If someone were to take photos, she definitely couldn't reveal her real face. Although Ning Shu was sobbing and her tears were like running water, she clearly explained the ins and outs of the matter. The lawyer also took out the injury examination report. When she said that she was sad, Ning Shu cried loudly. Her voice was filled with fear and her body was trembling. This made Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming stare at Ning Shu. Their eyes almost popped out. They looked at Su Feng, who was sitting in the gallery. This was different from what they had said. Su Feng also looked at her daughter in shock. She was also very angry. Why didn't she listen? Li Jianming had a bad temper. After being treated like this by his daughter, how dare she treat him like this? He immediately shouted, "What did I do wrong? It's a damn woman who shamelessly did such a thing. It's so dirty and shameless. I only hate that I didn't chop her to death." Ning Shu's body trembled. The lawyer immediately said, Li Jianming always wanted to kill the victim, and he didn't think he was in the wrong. He didn't know that he had caused harm to others. Li Jianming glared at the lawyer angrily. The one who deserves to die is that girl. She's really raised by a bitch. How embarrassing. Ning Shu kept wiping his tears as he sobbed. His voice was filled with despair as it echoed in everyone's ears. Dad, don't kill me. Don't kill me. I didn't do it. Uncle Wang forced me. More than once. He told me not to tell anyone. If I did, he would throw me away. He wouldn't let me study anymore. I was so scared. He forced me every time. I refused, but he pressed on. Wang Zhiyong's expression was ferocious. Stop spouting nonsense. You were the one who seduced me. Ning Shu's mouth twitched. A child who had just started to develop seduced you. Ning Shu shook his head. I didn't. You came over when I was doing my homework. You touched me. Su Feng, who was listening in, was about to be eaten up by the group of relatives and friends. All of them were making things difficult for her. Look at what a good daughter she raised. She actually came to the court to say such a thing. It's so dirty. I'm embarrassed to say it. If Zhiyong goes to jail, get lost. Get lost from the Wang family. Divorce. You have to get a divorce. She was punished by the heavens. She sent her own father to jail. What a shameless girl. Why didn't they chop her to death back then? These people stretched out their fingers and poked Su Feng's face. Su Feng couldn't refute them. She lowered her head as if she was the one who had done something wrong. What should she do in the future? What should she do? Su Feng was anxious. Everyone was blaming her. Wang Zhiyong's family was going to kick her out of the house. Was she going to get a divorce? It was really too tiring. This daughter of hers? Su Feng was angry and helpless. She hugged her head. She couldn't see the future clearly. She wanted to drink pesticide and be done with it. It was a mess. The judge knocked on the gavel. Silence, silence. Keep quiet. Ning Shu squatted down and curled into a ball. He was shivering and begging, "Don't hurt me. Don't kill me. Don't kill me." The lawyers of both sides didn't argue much. The situation was already very clear. Two fathers. One attempted murder and didn't repent. The other raped a woman. She probably destroyed the universe in her previous life. That was why she had two fathers in this life. The judge sentenced Wang Zhiyong to 10 years in prison for raping a woman. Raping a woman would be punished within the range of 3 to 10 years in prison. If the crime was serious, the sentence would be more than 10 years in prison, life imprisonment or death. The client wasn't killed. Naturally, it wasn't serious. But it was already good enough that he could get 10 years. Moreover, this matter wouldn't end just like that. 10 years was just a legal punishment. It didn't mean that she would let it go. Li Jianming was guilty of intentional homicide. If it wasn't for Ning Shu, the client would have died. Intentional homicide would be sentenced to death, life imprisonment or more than 10 years in prison. Although it wasn't fatal, it caused harm. The lawyer presented the hospital's injury report. With this evidence, the sentence could be more severe. There were several cuts on the body. Some of the wounds were still very dangerous. Li Jianming's sentence was 11 years. When the verdict came out, the public gallery was in a mess. The two men were not convinced. They insisted on appealing and dissatisfied with the verdict. The two emotional men were suppressed. When they passed by Ning Shu lowered his head and whispered, "Idiot, you deserve it. Sit in prison until you die." The two men were already angry. Wasn't it just because they did this to a girl? Why should they be sentenced to more than 10 years in prison? What's wrong with me educating my daughter? When they heard Ning Shu's words, they were furious. They broke free from the court police's control and rushed over to Ning Shu. Ning Shu screamed as she covered her head and scurried away like a rat. She desperately shouted for help as the two men surrounded her. Ning Shu kicked Wang Zhiyong's lower body without leaving a trace. Then, he injected some violent fiery sun energy. He also injected some fiery sun energy into Li Jianming's heart. Ning Shu clenched his fists and punched the two men. There were no marks on his fists. The force of his fists had already penetrated deep into his body. The scene was chaotic. The judge and court staff were stunned. The two men were beating up Ning Shu. The swarm of people were beating and tearing at Su Feng. They pulled Su Feng's hair. Su Feng was in so much pain that she couldn't fight back. Chapter 3109. The scene was chaotic. It seemed that Ning Shu was being beaten by two people, but when Ning Shu's fists landed on the two people, waves of qi directly entered their bodies. This kind of qi would not suddenly kill people, but would only make people fall into a more painful state. Su Feng was being beaten by two people from her husband's family. There were few people from her family, so they could not beat them. They probably felt that Su Feng was embarrassing, so they stood aside and did not join the fight, watching Su Feng being scratched and scratched. There were wounds on her face and body. Su Feng begged for mercy, but no one listened. Everyone was venting their anger on her. Many court policemen came in to mediate, but the scene was so chaotic that they could not pull them apart for a while. Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming wanted to take this opportunity to escape, but they were held down by the police. Ning Shu was crying. After the two men were taken away, Ning Shu came out of the court and saw Su Feng being dragged out and kicked like an animal. She was thrown to the ground like a rag doll. Her hair was messy, and there were many scratches on her face. Ning Shu walked over and stood in front of Su Feng. Facing these people, he said coldly, if any of you dare to hit me again, I will immediately hold you tight and say that you deliberately hurt me. Anyway, I am already like this. I even dared to send my own father to prison. Do you want to try? Damn girl. A girl with evil intentions like you should die. You are really thick-skinned. If you don't leave, I will call the police. Grandma, Grandpa, Grandma Wang, Grandpa. Ning Shu looked at the people present. Anyway, I am already so rebellious. I don't mind sending more people to prison. You, unreasonable people were afraid of those who did not care about their lives. Probably because Ning Shu was a ruffian now and had a fearless look as if he wanted to take revenge on society. Ordinary verbal attacks were useless against him. Ning Shu looked at these people indifferently. You what? Do you want me to call the police? What did you do to my mother in the gallery? The court has surveillance cameras. You can take a look at it. Hitting people in the courthouse, how much contempt do you have for the country's laws? Even if I can't let you go to jail, I want you to be detained for a period of time and put you in jail. You, how can there be such a shameless person like you in this world? Shameless. A person like you should let your father chop you to death. Otherwise, it would be a disgrace. Ning Shu rubbed his ears. What a weak and feeble language. His heart was basically unmoved. I'm so shameless that I'm scared of myself. Ning Shu pointed at his grandmother and said, You don't have to see who's the shameless one here. Your son is a murderer. Aren't you ashamed to have raised such a son? If I were you, I'd be dead already. You're already buried up to your neck and you still have a murderer as your son. Ning Shu moved his finger and pointed at Wang Zhiyong's mother. Your son is a rapist, and he even raped a little girl. You've lost all 18 generations of your ancestors. Just wait for the Wang family to be laughed at to death. The two grandmothers were so angry at Ning Shu that their faces turned purple. They pointed at Ning Shu and said, You're the shameless one. You've done such a shameless thing at such a young age. In the future, no man will want you. You won't be able to get married. Why do you care if I can get married or not? When I grow up, you old farts will be rotting in your coffins. You won't be able to tell me if I can get married or not. Ning Shu spat. Still not leaving? Ning Shu looked at the dazed Su Feng and said to her, Do you still want to be beaten? Oh. Su Feng was like a marionette. She did whatever Ning Shu said and got up from the ground. Her expression was a little painful, probably because of the injury on her body. Ning Shu pointed at these people and said, If you want to go to jail, then come and beat me and my mother. Anyway, we're in court. You don't have to run. Ning Shu's injuries hadn't healed yet. Now that he was testifying in court, the wounds on his body started to hurt. He walked back to the hospital, mainly because Ning Shu didn't have money. Walking back to the hospital with injuries really hurt. It was really tough to not have money. Su Feng followed behind Ning Shu step by step. Ning Shu turned around and saw Su Feng looking at him in shock. Jing. Ning Shu said, Come and help me. My wounds hurt. Only then did Su Feng react. She quickly hailed a taxi. There were taxis in the county. Ning Shu got into the taxi and returned to the hospital. Ning Shu lay on the hospital bed and sighed comfortably. He asked Su Feng, What do you plan to do? We can't stay here for long. Those people will come to the hospital. As long as the two men were in jail, the people outside would think of ways to get them out. How? Of course, she, the victim, had to help. Even if she couldn't get them out, she could at least reduce their prison time by a few years. Therefore, the hospital wasn't a place to stay for long. It was just that the injuries on his body were recovering a little slowly. Back and forth, aggravating his injuries. Ning Shu would never let himself suffer. Since things had come to an end, of course, he had to take good care of his body. He had to love himself. Ning Shu took the small mirror by the bedside and looked at himself. Sigh, this little face. There was no color at all. It was so yellow. Sigh, it didn't look good. Su Feng's hand was shaking as she poured water. I don't know either. Jing, before you did this, why didn't you tell me? Ning Shu couldn't be bothered to talk to her. What was the use of telling you? How was it possible to please both sides? Now that things had come to this, the Wang family and the Li family couldn't tolerate Su Feng. Even if she went back to her maternal family probably wouldn't let her stay. The Li family and the Wang family would come and cause trouble. There was no way to live. Moreover, a married daughter was like spilled water. Su Feng's maternal family wouldn't accept such a troublesome person. Therefore, Su Feng had no way out now. At least, she couldn't stay in this place anymore. It was very likely that she would be tortured by the two angry families. At that time, no one would be able to help her. Not only did Ning Shu hit her when she was down, he even closed the manhole cover. Of course, Mom can still continue to live here. After 10 years, when Uncle Wang comes out, Mom and Uncle Wang can talk about old times and be together again. At that time, it would be good if Wang Zhiyong didn't kill her. Su Feng was a toad. Sometimes, even if a knife was about to fall, she wouldn't move at all. Was it more difficult and painful to move than being slaughtered? Wait for 10 years. Wait for 10 years with unchanging infatuation. Su Feng was clearly aware of her situation. She wanted to blame her daughter, but facing her calm and indifferent gaze, she couldn't bring herself to reprimand her. She muttered, Jing, what should Mom do? What can you do? Hurry up and go home to get your household register and get your marriage certificate. If you can get a divorce, hurry up and get it. Sneak back at night. Otherwise, they will kill you. Kill you. Chapter 31:10. The law does not punish the majority. So what if Su Feng was killed by angry villagers? Her body would be thrown into the wilderness. Of course, Ning Shu was the most likely person to end up like this. Su Feng's heart trembled. She couldn't imagine that her daughter would say that. She quickly went home. But she also knew that it was possible. The two families looked at her so fiercely. After Su Feng left, Ning Shu stuffed another fasting pill into her mouth. She was injured and needed a lot of energy. She was going to leave the hospital soon. The Wang family and the Li family knew about this ward. The more these people found trouble with her, the more pain she would inflict on the two men. Their hearts would ache. Su Feng sneaked home, but she was still caught by Wang Zhiyong's mother. She grabbed Su Feng's bag and said, "What are you doing? Do you want to take away all the property at home?" Su Feng felt bitter. How could she have any property? Even if she had, Wang Zhiyong had gambled it all away. Wang Zhiyong's mother beat Su Feng up. Su Feng ran away in a panic like a dog. Facing other people's insults, Su Feng didn't even dare to refute. She cried silently. She was frightened all the way. When she returned to the ward and saw her daughter on the bed, she was relieved. She probably felt that the man was unreliable and the daughter was now the one she could rely on. Ning Shu felt that this was a good thing. As long as Su Feng listened to him in the future, it would be fine. Su Feng's life was dominated. She didn't dare to make her own decisions. As long as someone asked her to do something, it would be fine. If I don't dominate you, I'll be sorry for your docility. Ning Shu sat up slowly and asked, "Did you bring the documents?" "Yes." Su Feng quickly took out the documents from the cloth bag. Ning Shu said, "Think about it. If you want a divorce, hurry up and get it. Then we'll leave here." At the same time, he could change his identity for Su Feng. To be honest, keeping Su Feng by his side was like carrying a bomb. Even if she left, her heart might soften in the future and she might go back to her hometown to take a look. He couldn't make the decision on big matters, but Su Feng was the one who could stir up trouble on small matters. If it wasn't for the fact that the client was young and needed a guardian, Ning Shu wouldn't have cared about Su Feng. After all, Su Feng didn't use her soul power. However, Su Feng was still the client's mother. The client had no source of income and needed Su Feng to support him in the future. When the client reached adulthood, she would be able to survive on her own. At that time, she would provide for Su Feng. The mother and daughter would depend on each other for survival, and they would be able to live a prosperous life. She was just afraid that Su Feng would suddenly lose her mind. Su Feng held the marriage certificate in her hand. "Are you really getting a divorce?" Ning Shu, "Then wait for Uncle Wang to come out." After 10 years, Su Feng would be in her 40s or even 50s by the time she came out. Moreover, he didn't know what Li Jianming and Wang Zhiyong would look like after they were released from prison. Su Feng said, "Jing Jing, I'll listen to you." Su Feng's divorce went very smoothly, and Ning Shu took advantage of the situation to apply for identity protection and opened another household. This household could only accommodate the two of them. They said that when the two men were released in the future, they would kill the mother and daughter. Not only those people, but also the people around them would beat and scold them. They wanted to move their household registration away. This procedure was a bit complicated, and they had to wait for a while as all kinds of procedures had to be completed. Ning Shu was discharged from the hospital and squeezed into a small hotel with Su Feng to wait for the examination. She was discharged to prevent those people from coming to her and asking her to do something to reduce the punishment of the two men. It wasn't that she was afraid of these people, but that she couldn't be bothered to argue with them. If they couldn't find the two men, they would be anxious to death. No matter how they appealed or made a fuss, the result wouldn't change. They might even make the situation worse because of the waste of legal resources. They were so unrepentant and still wanted to reduce their sentence. Dream on. Moreover, the Wang and Li families were just ordinary families. They didn't know any big shots and didn't have as much money as gold or silver mines. The chances of them turning the tables were zero. Su Feng didn't ask about what Ning Shu did. She guessed that there was someone in front of her who planned everything. Su Feng hid under the wings and had already regarded Ning Shu as her pillar of support. She couldn't wait for Wang Zhiyong for 10 years, and she couldn't continue living in the same place as before. Moving to another place with her daughter was the only way now. Her daughter said that she would open a household and the head of the household would be her. Su Feng didn't say anything. As for changing her name, Su Feng only hesitated for a moment before agreeing. She was a little melancholic. Once she changed her name, she would no longer be the daughter of the Su family. Ning Shu ignored Su Feng's melancholy and went to the detention center to take a look. Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming were still in the detention center of the police station and hadn't been officially sent to prison. When the various procedures were completed, this matter would be settled. Therefore, they usually had to fight for this period of time. They should appeal and hire a lawyer. The two families wanted to appeal, but first they had to hire a lawyer. When the lawyer saw that the case was settled, there was no need to fight. Even if they appealed, the court would reject it. Even if the court didn't reject the appeal, it would only make the situation worse. Why did things turn out like this? If they could get the forgiveness of the victims, things wouldn't turn out like this. They even beat up the victims in court. This, even if the lawyer had a glib tongue, he couldn't say the truth. After getting the forgiveness of the victims, these people started to look for Ning Shu and Su Feng. They wanted Ning Shu to write a love letter to express that he had forgiven the two of them. But there was no one at the hospital, and the two of them didn't go home. So, this group of people went to Su Feng's parents' house. Su Feng had nowhere to go and would definitely go back to her parents' house. But there was no one at her parents' house, and a conflict broke out. One side wanted to hand over the two of them, and the other side didn't have anyone to hand over. It was normal for them to fight. After searching everywhere, the two families realized that the two of them had run away. Now, they didn't know where they went. How could they find them? Ning Shu strolled around the police station and looked at the two people in the detention center. These two people were her fathers. Looking at the two of them, Ning Shu felt that it was still too early. After dealing with these two people, the next problem was money. The world was so big, and without money, one couldn't go anywhere. Ning Shu returned to the hotel, and Su Feng quickly said to Ning Shu, "Jing Jing, I bought you some food. Hurry up and eat." Ning Shu didn't stand on ceremony and started eating. She felt that it was a little funny. Now, Su Feng's attitude towards her had a hint of flattery. Did she need to flatter her? What was Su Feng afraid of? She treated a child as her pillar of support. She looked like an adult and was in her 30s, but she was still very young mentally. Men were the pillars of the family. Now, there was no man to support Su Feng mentally. She could only find someone to be her pillar of support, even though Ning Shu was a child. She could also find an excuse for herself. It was all for her daughter. Chapter 31:11. Maybe in the future, he would be able to change the reason for leaving his home to his daughter. If he didn't find a reason, he wouldn't be able to continue living. So what if he said it was for himself? Su Feng picked up some food for Ning Shu and asked cautiously, "Jing Jing, are we leaving after we get the documents?" "Yeah, do you want to go and see the two fathers?" Ning Shu asked. "We can see them but we can't reveal any information. Otherwise, when they get out of prison, they will come and kill us." Ning Shu used a knife and slit his neck. Su Feng was so scared that her face turned yellow. Su Feng didn't have much money on her and she had to go to a foreign place to live. It was very scary and she was very afraid of the future. Su Feng was worried and the two men at the police station were causing trouble. Both of them said that their bodies hurt a lot and they wanted to go to the hospital. Li Jianming said that his entire body hurt as if he was being stabbed by needles or punched a few times. His lungs felt as if someone was squeezing them and he couldn't breathe at all. He felt like he was suffocating. Wang Zhiyong covered his lower body and said that it hurt a lot. It was as if he couldn't feel the existence of that piece of meat. It was painful and numb. After the pain, he couldn't feel anything at all. He couldn't stand up either. It was as if he was paralyzed. He couldn't feel the existence of his legs. He couldn't feel anything when he touched or pinched. He was so scared. Was he going to die? Sometimes, a man's confidence came from these two pieces of meat. If two pieces of meat couldn't do it, it was enough to destroy a man's confidence. Wang Zhiyong never felt that he was wrong for doing that with his stepdaughter. He was a normal man and it wasn't like he did it with his own daughter. Even if he went to jail because of this, Wang Zhiyong wasn't that scared. Now that he couldn't do it, Wang Zhiyong was panicking. The two of them were rolling on the ground in pain. Of course, they had to be sent to the hospital. Li Jianming's body was fine and there was no pain. The report was normal. Even if there was a slight abnormality, it was just a liver problem. Li Jianming loved to drink. The doctor said that he was fine and it made Li Jianming angry. "How can I be fine? My entire body hurts. It hurts a lot. Did you check seriously? I'm in pain." However, after checking again, it was still the same as before. There was a slight problem with the liver. As for the pain in the body, it was completely undetectable. Moreover, the point of pain was not fixed. One moment, it would be pain in the heart, the next moment, it would be pain in the stomach, and the next moment, it would be pain in the head. This was completely cheating. The doctor and the police were a little impatient. It was obvious that he was trying to avoid punishment. One moment it hurt, the next it hurt. How could it be possible? If you say it hurts, then it hurts. The test results are normal, and you still want to deny it? Dream on. Li Jianming kept shouting, "It's really painful. It's really painful. Ouch." He was really in pain. Why didn't anyone believe him? He felt as if a needle had pierced into his body, into his muscles. It was so painful that his entire body was trembling. But these doctors and police officers looked on coldly as they watched him in pain. Even if it was just some medicine, some painkillers, some painkillers. Li Jianming asked the doctor for painkillers, but he couldn't take them casually. Taking them casually could cause problems, so the doctor didn't prescribe them for him. Why would he feel pain for no reason when there was no pathological change in his body? A doctor said, "Is this pain that you're imagining? There's nothing wrong with your body." Imagining. Sometimes, it wasn't the human body that was in pain, but the person himself. It was so painful that it seemed like he couldn't stand it. In fact, his body wasn't in pain. The human brain was so magical. Li Jianming stared angrily. What the hell? Was he imagining that his head and body hurt? Was he imagining that his entire body hurt? He wasn't sick. It was clearly his body that was in pain. These quack doctors. People tended to be irritable when they were in pain. Li Jianming grabbed the doctor's collar and was about to hit him, but he was stopped by the police. The doctor said, "Take him to the neurology department for identification." He was so irritable, and he loved imagining things. Could he be crazy? The police were speechless. Fuck. If he was diagnosed as crazy, then he would be acquitted. Crazy people weren't guilty of killing people. Should they do a psychiatric evaluation on this criminal? They still had to write a report. How troublesome. The doctor gave Li Jianming a tranquilizer. Li Jianming, who was asleep, didn't feel any pain, but he would still feel pain when he woke up. Compared to Li Jianming, who couldn't find the reason but was in pain all over his body, Wang Zhiyong found the reason. Wang Zhiyong's cavernous body didn't have smooth blood flow and was now in a necrotic state. What cavernous body? It was because of the lack of blood flow and the tissue was now necrotic. How should he deal with it? He could either cut it off. Even if he kept it, it would only be a toilet tool and wouldn't have any other use. And the results of the examination were very strange. The small blood vessels and nerves seemed to have been cut off by something or burned by something. The blood vessels were stuck together and were in a state of non-circulation. This resulted in a situation where there was no connection between the nerves and blood supply. He came to the hospital early. Although it was guaranteed that the thing was complete, it was useless. Police, what was this? Retribution. He raped his stepdaughter, and then his little brother was useless. He felt that women were poisonous and couldn't be touched. Wang Zhiyong, who had undergone surgery, woke up. He heard that his little brother was dying. He touched it and it was in great pain. There were wounds all over it left from the surgery. He didn't believe that his little brother was dying. He didn't have any children. How could the Wang family's bloodline be cut off? More importantly, if he couldn't do it, he would be laughed at. How could he be masculine? Would he be like a eunuch? Collapse. Humans especially cherished the things on their body. Their facial features, limbs, and even their third leg. After such a thing happened, they naturally had to wait until Wang Zhiyong was discharged from the hospital before the court could carry out the trial. They also had to inform his family. The Wang family and the Li family came to the hospital. When they saw their sons in such a state, they felt that the police must have mistreated their sons. They must have been treated inhumanely in the detention center. These people seemed to have found a breakthrough. The two families went to the police station every day to cause a ruckus. They wanted to make this jail time disappear. In the beginning, the police would still explain that there was no mistreatment. They even pulled up the surveillance cameras. But these people didn't listen. They just wanted to get him out. Who cared what the truth was? Anyway, something happened to him at the police station. They had to take responsibility. Later, the police allowed these people to cause a ruckus. They had evidence in their hands. So what if these people petitioned? The police station didn't do anything wrong. Why did they have to cause a ruckus at the police station? If they had the ability, they could go to the court. The court would decide. Did they think that the police station was easy to bully? Chapter 31:12. When the two of them recovered, they were still going to be sent to prison. There was no point in making a fuss. The Li and Wang families had no choice. They had no connections. They were just ordinary people. Even if they had connections, they wouldn't be able to get it. They didn't know any important people. The two shameless women had disappeared from the face of the earth. They went to the hospital to ask, and the doctor said that they were discharged. As for where the patients went, it was none of their business. How could they know? Now that they saw their son in this state, their hearts ached, but they couldn't do anything. Especially the Wang family. They knew that Wang Zhiyong had become a useless person. Wang Zhiyong's mother sat in the corridor of the hospital, slapping her thighs. Threats and begging were useless. What to do? What to do? Could it be that they could only watch? It was strange. The men from the Wang family had raped the granddaughter of the Li family, but the two families didn't fight. Instead, they worked together to find a way out and get their sons out. This kind of spectacle probably wouldn't be seen again. Ning Shu felt that it was quite interesting. Seeing the pain of the two men, Ning Shu felt that this was normal. Being cut by a knife was so painful that their bodies were trembling from the pain. Since they had done it, they had to bear the consequences. The tools were confiscated. Rapists like them should be sentenced to death. They should be severely punished. Let's see who dared to have such thoughts. If they had concerns, they wouldn't dare to hurt others. Their new identities had been revealed. Ning Shu and Su Feng had changed their names. Su Feng had applied for a new passport and changed her residence. Ning Shu found a city far away from this place and went as far as he could. The process took a long time. It was mainly to change all aspects of the identity. After Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming were discharged, they would be sent to prison. This kind of small county didn't have a prison. They would be sent to the city or the provincial prison. Li Jianming said that his whole body hurt. If he didn't go to prison, his whole body would really hurt. Everyone thought that Li Jianming was lying to avoid serving his sentence. Even Li Jianming's parents thought that Li Jianming was faking it. But it really hurt. He wasn't faking it. Li Jianming was about to go crazy. Couldn't someone believe him? Why didn't anyone believe him? Li Jianming was so irritable that he wanted to kill someone. He was so irritable that he wanted to destroy everything. Wang Zhiyong, on the other hand, was like a defeated rooster. He did not resist going to prison like Li Jianming did. In his current situation, he might as well go to prison. He would be laughed at when he returned. Wang Zhiyong didn't want to admit that this was retribution. What retribution? He just did such a thing to a woman. Weren't women meant to be fucked? Otherwise, it would have been a waste. No matter how angry Wang Zhiyong was in his heart, his little brother was still the same, soft and useless. He probably wouldn't be able to stand up for the rest of his life. Without the masculinity of a man, he wouldn't be considered a normal man. He wouldn't be able to be with a woman, and he wouldn't be able to carry on the family line. Wang Zhiyong was a very traditional man. Descendants were very important. If he didn't leave a descendant for the Wang family, then he would be letting down the Wang family. Now, he didn't even have a daughter, let alone a son. Why? Li Jianming, who was opposite him, seemed to be suffering from mania. He moved around and twitched all over. Wang Zhiyong looked away in disgust. If it wasn't for Li Jianming's brain, how could things have turned out like this? Why didn't he kill that girl? If she was killed, it would be Li Jianming's fault alone. He was the only one who committed the crime and killed. As for what he did to Li Jing, there was no evidence. No matter how much trouble he made, it wouldn't be on his head. He was such a big man, but he couldn't even kill a little girl. Useless thing. Outside the car, there was the sound of his family members crying and howling. Wang Zhiyong didn't even look at them. What was the use of crying? Getting them out was the right thing to do. Otherwise, it would be useless even if they cried until they were blind. Li Jing didn't appear. If she appeared, she would have a way to coax a little girl. But she didn't appear even once. His biological father and stepfather were locked up, and they didn't come to visit him even once. It was probably the conflict in court that made Li Jing not come. But if Li Jing didn't come, why didn't Su Feng come to see him? They were forced to divorce, but Wang Zhiyong was confident that Su Feng wouldn't give up on him. Because Su Feng didn't dare to abandon him. Now that there was a problem with his body, he couldn't find another woman. When he was released from prison, of course, he would still live with Su Feng. The car started and left with the prisoner. The two families watched helplessly as the car drove away. It's all your granddaughter and daughter-in-law's fault. They are a jinx. They caused my son to be like this. Wang Zhiyong's mother immediately argued with the Li family, asking them to pay for the medical expenses. Her son's surgery cost money. The Li family's people immediately spat, "Look at what your son did. He actually did that kind of thing to his stepdaughter." If Wang Zhiyong didn't do this kind of thing, Jianming wouldn't be so impulsive to kill someone. The two sides started to tear at the entrance of the police station. They blamed each other and instantly fell out. The police even came out to stop the fight. It was really unprecedented for the fight to come to the entrance of the police station. Ning Shu and Su Feng stood on the street opposite the police station and saw it from beginning to end. Su Feng muttered, "Two families have been destroyed. The sons of the two families had been arrested. Without a son to support the family, there would be no one to take care of the two old people in the future. After more than 10 years, who knew what would happen to them?" Ning Shu was already used to Su Feng's kind words for no reason. She said it as if she couldn't bear it and destroyed the two families. What did these two families have to do with her? Could it be that she should forgive them and protect them? How good would it be to be a jinx? No one would dare to provoke her. Su Feng looked at her daughter and realized that there was a faint smile on her face. She didn't know why, but her heart turned cold. She said, Jing, let's go back. They will find us later." Su Feng had experienced the fighting power of these people. Ning Shu nodded, "Okay, Mom. Let's go back." Su Feng and Ning Shu smiled, Jing, Mom, don't say anything. In the future, the two of us will live well. If you have a man you like, you can get married again. You already have a new identity now, Ning Shu said calmly. He didn't know if Su Feng was a scumbag. He didn't know what kind of man she would meet in the future. He just hoped that Su Feng wouldn't meet a man and rush for a result. When you meet a person, you will pour your heart out. You think this is straightforwardness. No, this is just loneliness. Loneliness makes you pour your heart out completely, afraid that the other party will be dissatisfied. Chapter 31:13. To be honest, Ning Shu was a little afraid of Su Feng. She was afraid that Su Feng would find a father for her. She didn't want her to become a fatherless child because she didn't want her to have no father to call her. Some people didn't learn from their mistakes. Even if something like this happened, they wouldn't reflect on themselves. They would just continue living like this. Hence, some ugly words had to be said first. She didn't want Su Feng to pull her into another fire pit right after she had jumped out of the fire pit. Ning Shu looked at Su Feng, making her feel uneasy. She then said, "Mom, I think we need to set some rules. Some things have to be said clearly to prevent something like this from happening again. No one can withstand another round of destruction like this. If it happened again, they might as well all die together. She worked so hard just to live a little better. In the end, it happened again, over and over again. What was there to live for?" Su Feng nodded. "Go on." Ning Shu said, "You can have a boyfriend, but don't get married before I turn 18. Please don't get married. Although I have no right to interfere with you, we are a family. Moreover, the two of us depend on each other. We have to consider each other's feelings. I only have one request for you. If you can do it, we will live together. If you can't, then we don't have to live together." Su Feng nodded. "I can do it. I can do it. Jing Jing, don't worry. I will definitely do it." Scum suckers lacked a sense of security. When she saw someone treat her slightly better, she would stick to them and suck warmth from them. Even if they weren't warm in the end and even cold, she was already used to this person. Habits were inseparable from this person. Ning Shu even made a contract for Su Feng to sign. Su Feng was a little unhappy. "Jing Jing, do you have so little faith in Mom? Since Mom has agreed, I will definitely do it." Ning Shu said, "I don't want to be raped again." Su Feng was a little sad and said, "Jing Jing, not everyone in the world is bad. Not everyone is like your Uncle Wang. We will also meet good people. You can't be so pessimistic. You can't lose hope in the world just because of what happened." "Wath. I'm pessimistic. I haven't even called you childish. Regardless of whether there are many good people or bad people in this world, we have to live our own lives first. Do you expect a good person to appear and save them?" Ning Shu felt that he might not be able to communicate with Su Feng. It was easy to deal with the two men, but Su Feng was probably the most difficult person to deal with. "Do you think she's wrong?" "She didn't do anything wrong. In fact, from a certain point of view, she could be considered a good person. She didn't do anything evil. But it was so stifling." Ning Shu sneered and retorted, "If you were raped, what would you do? What would you think?" Su Feng was stunned and couldn't answer because she didn't know what to do. At that time, it would be like the sky had collapsed. "That's why I'm quite good at blabbering. What if it happens to you? Is there any point in boiling rancid chicken soup?" She preferred listening to poisonous chicken soup, which made her feel refreshed. Su Feng immediately apologized, "Jing Jing, I was wrong." Then, she signed the contract, "I promise that I will never get married in this lifetime." Ning Shu said, "There's no need. Just stick to it for 6 years." Words like, "a lifetime," were enough. Some thoughts were deeply ingrained in one's bones and couldn't be pulled out. It was just that their views were different. She was probably a selfish person. She was obviously selfish and thinking for herself. Su Feng, on the other hand, was a person who was willing to contribute. Although she liked to find excuses to cover up her selfishness, she understood that her actions were for others and that she had no choice but to do so. The next step was to pack up and leave this place. When they left, they took the train. They couldn't afford to take a plane. Su Feng clung tightly to Ning Shu. She was obviously very afraid of the outside world. Ning Shu reached out and patted her. It was better to rely on her than to rely on a man. In the future, she would have to make decisions on big and small matters, even if she found a man in the future. If she didn't agree, Su Feng would definitely not dare to get married. Taking Su Feng along ensured the client's life. She was too young and couldn't earn money. Although she was a guardian without ideas, at least she had a guardian, even if this guardian was just an empty shell. Orphans were too miserable. Therefore, she and Su Feng were in a relationship of mutual benefit. She didn't know how much feelings there were between them. Ning Shu took Su Feng to the registered residence and prepared to settle down here. It wasn't a big city. The cost of living in a big city was too high. They didn't even have a house to live in. Ning Shu found a small hotel to stay in first, then looked for a rental. In this situation, they could only find a rental. 1 bedroom and 1 living room were good enough. The mother and daughter could squeeze into 1 room to sleep. Su Feng's ability to adapt was probably a little weak. Ning Shu talked to the landlord about the room, carried the bags in, and cleaned. Su Feng was still in a daze. When she saw Ning Shu cleaning, she immediately took the broom from his hand. "Jing Jing, let me do it. You're still injured. Let me do it." Ning Shu didn't force her. He handed the broom to her and then went to the kitchen to boil water. He was thinking about how to live next. He definitely had to continue studying, but it was impossible to rely on Su Feng alone. Su Feng didn't have the ability to pay for the house's utilities. Even if she found a job, it would be as a cleaner or a factory worker. Therefore, the family had to have extra income. But she was still young. What could she do? A good job was not picky about age. A hero was stumped by a penny. She couldn't do it without money. Ning Shu asked Su Feng, "Mom, how much money do you have?" Su Feng took out all the money. It was quite a lot, but it was all pocket money. There were a few large notes. Overall, it wasn't much. Su Feng said, "Don't worry. I'll find a job soon. Don't find one yourself. Spend some money to find an intermediary." An intermediary was the fastest. Su Feng didn't have any objections. Ning Shu really couldn't think of anything to do. Open an online shop. Or write a small article, submit it, create a public account or something. But all these had to be related to the internet. He couldn't do it without a computer. But the most important thing now was to contact a school. She had just graduated from primary school and had to continue studying. Su Feng found a job as a cleaner in a shopping mall through an intermediary. The salary wasn't high, but it was quite tiring. Su Feng was quite satisfied. She said that it was higher than the salary at home. Ning Shu had already contacted the school. The student registration was still the same, but the name was changed. He pulled Su Feng, the guardian, to go through the procedures. Ning Shu was struggling to survive. The 2 men in prison were living a life worse than death. Li Jianming's body was in pain. The doctors couldn't find anything. Chapter 31:14. The prison guards all thought that Li Jianming was pretending to be sick and deliberately causing trouble. No one believed him. Li Jianming was in so much pain that he wanted to harm himself. However, there were no tools for self-harm in prison, except for forks and chopsticks when eating. Li Jianming used the fork to stab his own hand. If he was injured, he must be treated. Wang Zhiyong just sneered. He hated Li Jianming very much because Li Jianming had exposed him not long after he came to the prison. There were many vicious people in the prison. Sometimes, even the prison guards would give them some face. Generally, newcomers would be trained for a period of time. As for how to train, there were many ways. Anyway, they had to train you to be obedient. Moreover, there were no women in prison. Men could not ignore their own physiological reactions. It was normal for that kind of thing to happen at this time. However, it was so rough without any preparation and tools. It was easy to be torn apart. Li Jianming was not good-looking, so he was not treated like this at first. Wang Zhiyong was white and fat, so it was normal for him to be tortured. Moreover, during the process, Wang Zhiyong's little brother did not stand up, which made these people laugh. In the end, you can't even do it. Brother, are you castrated? Men competed in power, wealth, and men's ability. If a man's ability was not good, he would be mocked to death by the same sex. While torturing Wang Zhiyong, they even pulled his soft little brother, which made Wang Zhiyong so ashamed that he wanted to die. Li Jianming's fierceness was only aimed at women and his subordinates. Here, there were many fierce characters. Of course, Li Jianming was scared. He exposed Wang Zhiyong's past, including Wang Zhiyong's impotence. There was also an ecological chain in prison. Rapists should be the most discriminated and despised. There were women on the street. Although it was immoral, it was not worth it to enter prison for this reason. Prisoners probably had the mentality of a hero. Rape, killing parents, and killing children would be despised. Some people, in order to humiliate this kind of rapist, dug a small hole on the ground and filled it with something. As for what to fill it with, of course, it was the rapist's crime tool. They would fill it with white sauce. However, although Wang Zhiyong was despised, Li Jianming was also despised. So what if he killed his own daughter? In short, these two people were like brothers in distress. They were often bullied and had to do all kinds of things, such as cleaning toilets. Sometimes, they would be bullied by others. Serving a sentence was not the most painful thing. Instead, it was dealing with the demons and monsters in the prison. Among these people, there were murderers, embezzlers, and gangsters. With background, strength, and connections, Wang Zhiyong and Li Jianming were ordinary people, so they had no connections. They weren't as ferocious as these people, who were tortured to death every day. Li Jianming's body was in pain, and Wang Zhiyong was called soft and squishy by others. All sorts of insulting nicknames were used. Seeing Li Jianming stick a fork into his hand, Wang Zhiyong just ate silently. He had a lot to do every day. If he didn't eat his fill, he would be hungry for a long time. Li Jianming's self-mutilation quickly attracted the attention of the prison guards. Some of the prisoners looked at Li Jianming with their legs crossed. Li Jianming was sent for treatment and would not return to prison for the time being. Wang Zhiyong became the target of torture. What was originally done by two people was now done by him alone. If he resisted, he would be beaten up violently. These old foxes already knew where the prison's blind spots were. They would drag him over and beat him up. Li Jianming said emotionally that his body was in pain. His whole body was in pain. He wanted a checkup. It was really painful. But even after a checkup, there were still no major problems. Li Jianming was so angry that he hit his head against the wall to prove that he wasn't lying. His body was in pain. Being held back, Li Jianming became emotional and cried out loud. "I'm telling the truth. You have to believe me. Believe me." The doctors looked at each other. They all suspected that this was Li Jianming's imagination. There was something wrong with his brain. They really had to do a mental evaluation. This prisoner was holding his head and saying that he had a headache. The next moment, he was holding his chest and saying that his heart was in pain. His expression was irritable and fearful. The more they looked at him, the more he looked like a lunatic. Maybe he was imagining the pain to escape punishment. It was like a lunatic. He always felt that someone was talking in his ear and all kinds of hallucinations appeared in front of his eyes. During the mental evaluation, Li Jianming swore that his body was in pain. It was real. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't an illusion. But other people couldn't feel the pain in his body. They didn't know if what he said was true or false. But the medical evaluation said that there were no lesions or pain in his body. Of course, the medical evaluation was more trustworthy. Ouch, it's hurting again. It's hurting again. Li Jianming hugged his head. It was so painful. His face was hideous. His expression looked like he was going crazy. The psychiatrist waved his hand and a fresh mental evaluation came out. Li Jianming still wanted to refute. But when he heard that he didn't have to go to jail and was going to be sent home, he didn't refute that he wasn't crazy. If he could escape from prison, it would definitely be good. He wouldn't have to face the evil people in prison for more than 10 years. It was said that it wasn't illegal for a lunatic to kill someone. With the lunatic's exemption, he wouldn't let Li Jing go. Not only Li Jing, Su Feng wouldn't be able to escape either. Li Jianming was sent home. The Li family was very happy. But when they heard that he had a lunatic, they were stunned. This was impossible. Their son was fine. How could he have a lunatic? A lunatic was a lunatic. How could their son be a lunatic? Regardless of whether the Li family believed it or not, Li Jianming had already been stamped as a lunatic. A lunatic had to be watched carefully and not let him do anything out of line. After the government people left, Li Jianming's mother chattered and asked her son, "What's going on? How did you go crazy? Did you suffer in prison? This matter can't be let go." Li Jianming was already very unhappy. His ears were full of chattering. It was so annoying. "Shut up, don't talk. Where's Su Feng and that bitch? Anyway, she was a lunatic. It wasn't illegal to kill someone. They're gone. They ran away when you got into trouble. Son, you've really suffered." Li Jianming was impatient to listen to this. He directly interrupted his parents. The pain in his body made him very impatient. The torture of pain was enough to distort his mind. When the parents saw their son rolling on the ground for no reason and wailing like a beast, it was especially frightening. They had no choice but to lock Li Jianming up. They didn't dare to let Li Jianming go out like this. Not only would he be laughed at, but he might also kill someone. Chapter 31:15. When they woke up in the middle of the night and saw Li Jianming sharpening a knife, the two of them were scared to death. Their son was really crazy. They could only lock the door from the inside. But when Li Jianming woke up, he banged on the door and roared in the room. It was scary. They didn't dare to let Li Jianming out. Although Li Jianming was released from prison, he was still locked at home by his family and couldn't leave. The more irritable he was, the more his family didn't dare to let him out. In the end, they even chained him up and didn't dare to go to his room. Including Li Jianming's parents. Li Jianming wailed in his room when he had nothing to do. Li Jianming clearly knew that he wasn't crazy, but he was labeled as one. He thought that everything would be fine after he was released, but no one believed him. This was the most despairing thing in the world. It wasn't like that. If one person believed him, one person would be good. Li Jianming's attitude towards his parents was also very bad. He repeated that he wasn't crazy, but his parents ran away in panic. They were very afraid of him. Now, Li Jianming's appearance was really scary. His eyes were red and he would shout at the slightest thing. He looked even more like a lunatic. Ning Shu had expected Li Jianming's situation. After being cut so many times, it didn't hurt. It bled and hurt. On the other hand, Li Jianming pretended to be crazy. In the end, he was really treated as crazy. This was enough for Ning Shu to laugh for a while. The feeling of being the only one who was clear-headed and knew that it wasn't the truth, but it was distorted by everyone. That feeling of being wronged and wronged wasn't a good feeling. Ning Shu used some money to buy a second-hand computer and opened an online shop. He used Su Feng's name, but the bank card was in Ning Shu's hands. The online shop sold some small things, like a grocery store. He didn't expect to earn much money. He just wanted to supplement his family's expenses. Occasionally, he would write some articles to earn some royalties. Like elementary and middle school essays, I have a dream, and so on. Or he would write about the scumbags he met over the years and the top quality women he met over the years. The top quality things he did over the years. With some views, he could get some tips. Other than that, Ning Shu still had to go to school and do his homework. Their days were still passable. They scrimped and saved enough to survive. However, Ning Shu was alarmed by Su Feng's recent strange behavior. Every time Su Feng brought lunch, she would bring 2 servings. It had only been half a year since she came to this place. Su Feng seemed to have fallen in love. Would she be able to finish lunch for 2? Ning Shu sighed. It really wasn't easy to make the situation better. Ning Shu didn't disturb Su Feng. Instead, he waited for Su Feng to go to work and went to the mall where Su Feng worked. In the resting area of the mall, she saw Su Feng eating with a man. This man was about 40 years old and was wearing a security guard uniform. They even had a meal together. It would be strange if there was nothing going on between the two of them. Ning Shu did not intend to interfere. As long as the two of them did not get married, he could not be bothered with anything else. Ning Shu originally thought that this quest was quite simple, but he discovered that this quest was not simple at all. Taking revenge on someone was very simple. However, the problems that came one after another were the ones that were more devastating. Ning Shu could remain calm. If it was the client, he would probably jump up. 10 years of fear, afraid of a stepfather. Even if it was for his own peace of mind, he would not agree to Su Feng getting married. He hoped that Su Feng would remember the 6 years. As long as the client was an adult, she could marry anyone she wanted. Ning Shu grabbed his hair. This was really messy. If it really didn't work, he would separate from Su Feng. He would take drastic measures to stay away from Su Feng. He didn't know if Su Feng would tell the man what happened in the past. Would he tell others that the client had been violated? Originally, they had already come to a new place. Ning Shu did not want any rumors to spread. Then, he would have to face the strange looks of the neighbors in the neighborhood. Although she did not care, others looked at her as if she was a monster. She was very unhappy. It was really unpleasant, but it was not a heinous crime. If he was fierce to Su Feng, it would make Su Feng feel wronged. Ning Shu glanced at the couple and turned to leave. From now on, he had to consider the existence of Su Feng in his life. Su Feng came back from the night shift. Seeing that Ning Shu was still playing on the computer, she said, "Jing Jing, stop playing. It's not good for your eyes." Ning Shu closed the computer. "I'm not playing. I'm making money." Su Feng smiled and went to the kitchen to wash the lunchbox as if nothing had happened. Ning Shu was not in a hurry. Su Feng would not be able to hold back. If she wanted to marry that man, she would definitely bring that man to her. Su Feng tried her best to wear nice clothes to work. She had to compare several sets of clothes. She tried them over and over again. Occasionally, she would put on some low-quality lipstick. The fine lines on her face were smoothed out. Ning Shu did not seem to notice these abnormalities. Every day, apart from going to school, he would play with the computer. Both of them had things in their hearts. Su Feng treated Ning Shu better and better. Occasionally, she would give Ning Shu more pocket money so that he could buy some clothes and food. The reason why Su Feng did not buy clothes for her daughter was that her daughter was very independent. She could choose whatever clothes she liked and it was convenient for her to give money. When she was not at work, Su Feng would also go out. Ning Shu felt that it was almost time. Soon, it would be time for them to officially meet. Su Feng walked with the wind and hummed while doing housework. She was like a withered tree that had come back to life. She was so happy. If she broke up this couple, she would seem cruel. Finally, on a Sunday, Su Feng came to Ning Shu and said, "Jing Jing, let's go out for dinner today. Mom will take you to eat good food. You should wear something nice." As she spoke, she looked for clothes in the closet. Ning Shu thought, here it comes. Counting with her fingers, Su Feng had forgotten about the contract after half a year and 3 months. She had said that she would not get married for the rest of her life. She had probably forgotten about it. This was the way some people lived. To her, this was survival. Ning Shu changed and went to a restaurant. The restaurant was well decorated. At least it was not a small restaurant. A man waved at them. Su Feng looked a little uneasy. She was afraid that Ning Shu would leave, so she pulled Ning Shu over. Come, sit down." The man hurriedly asked Ning Shu to sit down. Ning Shu sat down. Su Feng breathed a sigh of relief. She sat beside Ning Shu and said to the man, "Old Zhao, this is my daughter. Jing Jing, call Uncle Zhao." Ning Shu said, "Sawadika." This Uncle Zhao smiled. Su Feng could not sit still. It was as if Ning Shu was a bomb that could explode at any time and blow people up. That incident was enough to tell his daughter's personality. He was afraid that his daughter would flip the table. But if he had told her in advance, she definitely would not have come. Chapter 31:16. What does Jing Jing like to eat? You can order. The man handed the menu to Ning Shu. Ning Shu glanced at him and took the menu. She didn't stand on ceremony and ordered a few dishes. As for the price, it was slightly more expensive. Su Feng was tugging at Ning Shu's clothes under the table. Ning Shu turned around and looked at her in confusion. "What's wrong? Can't I order? Didn't you say you'd order for me?" "I won't order then." Who was she trying to save money for? What was she afraid of? Su Feng was instantly embarrassed. She looked at Ning Shu with pleading eyes. You can order," the man quickly said. The man said hurriedly. He looked like an honest man. Besides, he also ordered an expensive ice cream for Ning Shu. Su Feng quickly said, "How can a child eat such expensive ice cream? You don't have to order such expensive ice cream." Ning Shu let out a long breath. She wanted to fight for Su Feng, but her behavior really made Ning Shu speechless. What was the big deal about eating ice cream? Just how low was he going to go with his attitude? Ning Shu put down the spoon of ice cream and didn't eat anymore. Fortunately, it was Ning Shu. If it had been anyone else, they would have been dragged here by their mother to meet a man, who was also a stepfather, without knowing anything. Who knew what would happen? Ning Shu said, "Then I'll leave first. You guys take your time." The man immediately said, "Sit down. It's just ice cream. There are even 10 ice creams. Don't listen to your mother." Ning Shu said, "Who are you scolding?" The man was confused. "I'm not scolding anyone." The atmosphere was very awkward. Ning Shu went straight to the point and said, "I know what you mean." The man said that he wanted to marry Su Feng. Ning Shu was very calm. She calmly understood the man's situation. This man's wife had died of an illness. He had a son who was about to go to university. His parents had already passed away. Even if Su Feng married him, she wouldn't be able to take care of her in-laws. The man promised to take good care of Ning Shu. Ning Shu said indifferently, "You can get married, but I won't live with you. Just give me some living expenses every month. When I'm 18, you don't have to give me any more." Jing Jing. Su Feng looked at her. "I can live on my own. Just give me some living expenses every month." Ning Shu felt that if he continued to stay with Su Feng, he would really collapse. "I'm fine with living alone. As for safety, I'm sorry, I have time for that. He would give Su Feng some living expenses and earn some money to live on. After Su Feng got married, they would move immediately. She didn't want Su Feng to use her nest as an escape route and come looking for her whenever she had nothing to do. It was as good as being broken. In the future, when it was time to support him, he would just transfer the money to his card. The school was going to have a parent-teacher conference, so Su Feng had to be called. Even if she didn't go, it was fine. When Su Feng heard that her daughter agreed to her marriage, she was very happy. On the way back, she insisted that Ning Shu go to the Zhao family with her. Now that we have a new home, let's go to the new home. We'll be a family. A family together with a beautiful woman. Isn't that what people want? Ning Shu said, I'm not going. I know that feelings can't be stopped. The promise in the past doesn't mean anything. But let me go to the Zhao family. If I don't go, either you don't get married or don't let me go to the Zhao family. But I'm worried about you being alone. I'm fine. Ning Shu didn't want to bicker with Su Feng anymore. Later on, he would pin the reason for the marriage on her head and say that he got married because of her. In the end, Su Feng married that man and left the rented house. Before leaving, Ning Shu warned, don't talk about the past everywhere. Don't talk to your new husband and say that I'm like this because I was hurt in the past. Don't use me as a topic. The couple lay on the bed and chatted. He said that his daughter was very good. There was a reason why she was so cold. It was because she was hurt in the past. As for what hurt she was, blah blah blah, you probably don't want people to know that you used to have two husbands, right? Ning Shu didn't want people to care for her or despise her for no reason. Su Feng's wrist was pinched by Ning Shu and it hurt a little. She said, I know, Jing Jing. I won't tell anyone about this. Ning Shu let go of her hand and straightened the corsage in front of her. She said, then I wish Mom happiness and that you and Uncle Zhao will grow old together. Su Feng nodded. Thank you, Jing Jing. Jing Jing, Mom is sorry. Ning Shu said, what's done is done. Why are you saying this now? Was she supposed to say that she was fine and that Mom was happy? It was enough that she agreed. She still wanted people to congratulate her happily. She didn't want to take advantage of everything. Sure enough, Su Feng stopped talking. The groom came to take her away. Ning Shu breathed a sigh of relief. They were finally gone. She quickly packed her things and left. Before the two of them got married, Ning Shu had refunded the rent and found a new house. She didn't tell Su Feng. From then on, she lived alone. She wasn't a real child. Every month, Su Feng would send some living expenses over. She called Ning Shu to ask how he was doing. Ning Shu said that he was just so and couldn't be considered bad. He couldn't say that he was doing very well just to reassure Su Feng. Su Feng should know that his life wasn't that good. She must have known. She just wanted to hear some nice words to comfort herself. Without Su Feng in front of him, Ning Shu's life was quite simple and comfortable. However, the money that Su Feng sent to her had been decreasing. In the end, when it reached a certain amount, she would only send a little bit every month. She understood that Su Feng had a family to take care of. Ning Shu didn't ask her for money. He just recorded all the transfers. When he became an adult in the future and had the ability, he would return the money to her. In this world, Ning Shu actually stayed for 4 years. Moreover, the client didn't say anything about coming back. It wasn't until he was 16 that the client said that she would come back. During this period, Ning Shu finished junior high school and started high school. At the age of 16, even if he wasn't 18 yet, he could still work. It wasn't considered child labor. He had some ability to survive. When he was 12 or 13 years old, it was indeed difficult for ordinary children to survive. Moreover, it was a little impossible to earn money while studying. In these 4 years, Su Feng gave birth to a child. It was a boy. During the 1-month-old celebration, Ning Shu even went. Seeing the smile on Su Feng's face, Ning Shu didn't say anything. It was a good thing that someone was willing to take over Su Feng. Su Feng was focused on her son and husband and wouldn't bother her. However, the family that Su Feng married again was really poor. The restaurant and ice cream were just the man's face. The man's son was in college and almost spent all the family's money. Although the son was working now, his salary wasn't much. He was about to buy a house and marry a wife. The family's finances were very tight. Su Feng gave birth to another son, which would only make the family's finances even more tight. Chapter 31:17. Su Feng's new husband did not have a good family background. It could be seen from the living expenses he gave her. Usually, Su Feng had a salary and the living expenses were paid by Su Feng. However, the living expenses were getting less and less. In the beginning, Su Feng felt uneasy and embarrassed. She called Ning Shu and told him that the family was a little tight. Ning Shu did not expect Su Feng to give him this little money to live. Ning Shu did not say anything. Later, Su Feng gave him very little self-righteously. It was estimated that all the living expenses were used to support the family. In addition, the man's son was studying in university and needed money. The money he earned was used to support the family. Now that the eldest son was working, it was going to be a big event in his life. He was going to get married and have children. He wanted a new house. Did he want the new daughter-in-law to squeeze with the family in such a shabby neighborhood? The house was not big either. The house was very small. If there were more people, it would be very crowded. Buying a house required a lot of money. Ning Shu heard from Su Feng that the man wanted to sell the old house and buy a new one. It was going to be the wedding house for the eldest son. Ning Shu was stunned. Not to mention whether such a shabby house could be sold and how much it could be sold for. Where would Su Feng live if there was no house? Where would she live if there was no house? Su Feng said that she could rent a house. She would be able to get by slowly. Ning Shu was speechless. Even if they sold it and bought a new house, they would need to renovate it. The wedding gift would require a large sum of money. It could be said that the family had been emptied. Now that she had given birth to a child, the child would have to face a poor living environment. He would have to scrimp on food and clothes. However, Su Feng was very happy. She probably felt proud because she had given birth to a son. Li Jianming had said that she was a hen that could not lay eggs. However, had Su Feng thought about how much money it would cost to raise a child? The child was not just born. If the child was still studying in university, it would cost another 500,000 to 1 million yuan. It was not just born. The diapers were all cloth. It was not even wet diapers. The child's butt would be red. Ning Shu would occasionally bring some diapers and baby products over. To be honest, it was hard to be Su Feng's child. Moreover, Su Feng tried to curry favor with her eldest son, but her eldest son was very cold to her. Sometimes, Su Feng would even try to curry favor with him. Who knew what she was trying to achieve? She probably wanted to move her stepson. She would do whatever her husband said. If he said to sell the house, she would sell the house. In that case, her salary would be used for the living expenses of her eldest son. To curry favor with others and mistreat their own children, they probably thought that there was no need for them to stand on ceremony. However, this house had nothing to do with Su Feng. It was the Zhao family's real estate and had nothing to do with Su Feng. Even if they wanted to sell it, they wouldn't ask for her opinion. So what if she objected? This house wasn't hers. They were very poor. This child would have a hard life in the future. He was born at an old age. His parents were already old and could not do much work. What could they use to support him? Moreover, when this child grew up, perhaps one of them would pass away first. Ning Shu simply wanted to cover her face. She put down the things and talked to Su Feng for a while before leaving. Anyway, she was not going to live with Su Feng. Whether Su Feng's life was happy or unhappy in the future had nothing to do with her. A married mother was like water that had been poured out. Ning Shu had lived in this world for 4 years. During these 4 years, she had relied on herself to earn money and live. To be honest, living a life of worrying about money was very difficult. She did not even have the financial freedom to eat and drink. What fun was there in life? However, she did not need to eat and drink, but she still needed money to do other things. No matter what class she was, she had things to worry about. After returning to the system space, Ning Shu opened her arms and looked at her soul power. Was it still so weak? Ning Shu sat cross-legged and began to absorb the soul power. After absorbing for a while, her soul was slightly better, although it was still faintly discernible. Ning Shu picked up the mirror and looked at her face. Previously, her head had exploded, but there were no sequelae. She was still so beautiful. Such a beautiful face could not be ruined. Beautiful things needed to be well protected, especially on her own body. Admiring her beautiful face, Ning Shu opened the attribute panel. At the same time, the chat system rang. Ning Shu, system, what's the message? Read it out for me. It's a message from Zhu Li. He said that he has something to talk to you about. Go to Time City. There's also a message for you to do volunteer work. There's the location of the space node. Ning Shu replied, oh. She put down the mirror and glanced at the attribute panel. Name, Ning Shu. Age, 27. Rank, Super Mission Taker. Points card, 2,425, 10 million points per card. Soul, 321. Life, 291. Wisdom, 401. Luck, 261. Charm, 161. Mental power, 411. Martial power, 291. Qualifications, 361. Faith, 240,000/10,000 merit, 15,000,000 soul strength, 11-8 authorization ticket, 0 pure heart, none comprehended law, water law incarnation, wood law incarnation, space law incarnation, constructed world, reincarnation world item, calm halo, heart calming pill, amulet 4, upgraded amulet 2, faith bell honorary title, goddess of war, selfless ancestor skills. 5th ring shooting technique, intermediate fighting technique, intermediate level poison technique, beginner level business management knowledge, beginner level code programming, beginner level lawyer skill, sage ghost catching skill, beginner level cooking skill, intermediate level embroidery skill, trash hypnosis aura, mother of the world, queen's blessing, sister model worker, Chen Shi's blessing, leader aura, grass blessing, best friend for life, Meow Meow Meow's blessing, life-saving hand. Zhu Su's blessing, founding woman, Chen Ermiai's blessing, beauty in law, Chen Ning's blessing, bane of the blood clan, Jasmine's blessing, transcending race communication, Bai Sanyang's blessing, brave heart, Wang Ying's blessing, bloodthirsty tyrant, Ni Bingyan's blessing, heart of peace and joy, luck halo, faith halo, longevity. Completed Li Jing's wish. Mission completion rate, 100%. Mission reward, 5 points, 7 attribute points, 70% of soul, 10,000 faith, including the previous world's accumulation. After staying in that world for a long time, he probably had 70% of his soul power. Ning Shu went to see the Chongsam man first. He didn't know what treasure the Chongsam man had to show him. Ning Shu originally wanted to make a prophecy, but the prophecy would take away his power, so Ning Shu gave up. Although he didn't have the prophecy imprint, he still had the comprehension of the law of prophecy. Ning Shu's time was up. When he was free, he would come and comprehend the law of time. After all, he had plenty of time. Seeing the Cheongsam man, Ning Shu went straight to the point and asked, "Why are you looking for me?" Chapter 31:18. There's a new world over there. Let's pool our money and buy it together. We can also find some good stuff. Ning Shu said, "If it weren't for the fact that I don't have enough money, I wouldn't have come to you." Ning Shu spread her hands. "Then there's nothing I can do. My account is frozen now. I can't take out a single cent." Cheongsam man, why was her account frozen? She was speechless. She had never heard of anyone having their account frozen. Most of the money in frozen accounts was used by the organization first. You couldn't spend it. The money would be used by the organization first. Anyway, she had so much money in her account. The organization couldn't deny it. Cheongsam man looked at her from the corner of his eyes. Ning Shu shrugged. "There's nothing I can do. I don't have money. Do you have anything to sell to get some money?" Cheongsam man said, exasperated. Ning Shu said, "Why don't you give me some money first? If I really find some treasure, I'll sell it and return the money to you." Cheongsam man. "What if you don't find any treasure?" Ning Shu sighed and said, "How can you find treasure on the first try?" Cheongsam man waved his fan very quickly. He probably didn't have much money. If he didn't have money, he couldn't be rich. Ning Shu said, "Then let's meet again next time. We'll go after I get some money." Cheongsam man nodded helplessly. Ning Shu was really curious now. "You really don't have money?" Ning Shu felt that Cheongsam man was a hidden tycoon. Now, the tycoon had to worry about his 3 meals a day. This made Ning Shu feel a little disillusioned. "Are you still the leader of the law?" "Although I don't want to admit it, I've been quite poor recently. I've been dreaming about where to get money." Ning Shu said, "You can still sleep and dream. Isn't that a lot of pressure?" Cheongsam man said, "Will you die if you don't nitpick?" Ning Shu said, "I really don't have much money. My account has been frozen by the main system. Why don't you find someone else to raise the money? Of course, it would hurt if I had to pay the full amount, but if we split it evenly, it wouldn't be much." The man in the Cheongsam shook his head. Most of the mission takers are in their own groups, and they have their own selfish motives and interests. Working with people they don't know is a very dangerous thing. It seemed that the incident with the Tree of World had left a bad impression on the Cheongsam man. Ning Shu smiled. "Do I look that trustworthy?" "You're flattering me." The man in the Cheongsam waved his hand and signaled Ning Shu to leave. Even if the two of them got together and chatted, it would be useless. They had no money. If he had money, he would be a bastard. If he didn't have money, others would treat him as a bastard. Ning Shu comforted the Cheongsam man. "Don't be sad. You're not the only poor person in the world." Those skeletons were craning their necks to look at her, but she couldn't take out anything. Was it awkward? "Let's go. I don't want to talk to a poor person." Ning Shu returned to the system space. According to the space node given by the main system, he did his volunteer work and then continued to do missions. The most important thing now was to strengthen his soul. The second level no longer produced soul fluid. The array, which had cost a lot of money to set up, didn't accumulate much soul fluid. It wasn't that there wasn't much, but there was basically none. There hadn't been a drop for a long time. When he came to the damaged area of the plane, Ning Shu took out the bag and stretched out his vines to pick up the fragments. The bag was full and placed beside him. If there was a customer, he could just give the bag to the person. Soon, Ning Shu had a customer. Ning Shu said with a smile, "Please give me the merit grains directly." Once these merit grains were accumulated in the account, they would be frozen and couldn't be used at all. It was better to exchange them directly for merit. Of course, this was more troublesome. Some big bosses were unwilling. Ning Shu said directly, I only accept merit grains. If it's not merit grains, I won't do this business. The collected merit grains could be added to the skeleton's meals. There were policies and countermeasures. Even if her account was frozen, she could still get merit grains. Anyway, she was the only one who could pick up the merit grains. The other big bosses didn't care about this business. The reason why they let Ning Shu pick up the merit grains was nothing more than to relax. She was the only one. If she didn't use merit grains, she wouldn't do the transaction. Once the merit grains were in her account, she couldn't use them at all. Little girl, you're bullying your customers. A big boss said, why do you need merit grains for something that can be solved with a stroke? Besides, there's a tax on the exchange of merit grains. The organization will lower the price if they collect them. Ning Shu said, I need merit grains now. In essence, we're doing business. If you can't give me what I want, I won't exchange with you. Don't say that you're bullying your customers. If she talked to these old foxes, she would be led into a trap if she wasn't careful. They even accused her of bullying her customers. It was a fair exchange. What bullying? You can choose not to exchange with me. Alright, these big bosses would exchange for some merit grains. Ning Shu used the small sunny pouch to store the merit grains. This small sunny pouch had a huge space inside. It could store many things. If he could fill this space with merit grains, he would be rich. Hey, lass. Ning Shu turned and saw Greed. He said calmly, why are you still here? Ah, the previous punishment has ended. It's normal volunteer work now. I can leave after picking up 100,000. You don't pay attention to me at all, Greed asked. Ning Shu controlled the vines to pick up the fragments. During this period, when people came to trade, Ning Shu gave bags of fragments to the customers. I have many things to do. Why would I pay attention to you? Firstly, I don't like you. Secondly, I don't hate you. Thirdly, I'm not familiar with you. Greed asked, I heard that your head was smashed by the judge. Greed glanced at the granduncle who was handling the star stones and asked softly. Ning Shu said. Why is the main point that my head was smashed? Greed comforted Ning Shu. It's okay. It's good that you didn't die. Why did your soul become so weak again? Do you need soul power? Do you want me to help you? Ning Shu looked at Greed, shook his head, and said, Are you sure you can really get rid of the organization? Can you get rid of the organization by pulling people in? When he saw the granduncle, he was like a mouse seeing a cat. Of course, many people were like this. After all, they wanted to kill mission enforcers at the drop of a hat. Who knew if they would be wrongly killed? Greed patted Ning Shu's shoulder, but it went through Ning Shu's shoulder. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Greed laughed and said, Your soul is really weak. Do you think the slogan overthrow the organization is domineering? Greed asked. Ning Shu nodded. Very domineering. You talk about rebellion every day. Why are you so heartless and unreasonable? The organization has been so good to you, and you actually want to overthrow the organization. Without the organization, you wouldn't be where you are today. Greed looked at Ning Shu for a long time without saying anything. He touched his chest and looked a little nauseous. He was probably wondering if it was the right decision to recruit Ning Shu into the faction. Chapter 31:19. Ning Shu's face was as white as a saint's white lotus. Tell me, you're really heartless and unreasonable. You actually want to overthrow the organization. The organization has given you so much. You're just staying in the organization while trying to overthrow the organization. You're really heartless and unreasonable. Greedy wolf, stop, stop. What are you saying? It makes me sick. How am I heartless? Are you retarded? When you should be using your brain, you have to use your emotions. I work for the organization and the organization gives me things. That's not right. I work for the organization and I take what I deserve. It's not like I didn't do anything. What does that have to do with me wanting to overthrow the organization? The organization can kill mission enforcers. Who knows how many times I've brushed shoulders with death. I can't even complain about the organization. Ning Shu shook his head. Of course you can't complain. The organization is doing this for your own good. Without the organization, you wouldn't be here today. Without the organization, you'd be in samsara. You're actually so mean to the organization. Aren't you afraid that the organization will kick you out? Greedy Wolf rubbed his forehead. The organization won't kick people out. As long as people work, the organization won't care about what you think. I want to be reincarnated. Can I be reincarnated? Fuck, this was the bad thing about girls. It was so strange. The relationship between the organization and these mission enforcers was like the relationship between a ruler and his subjects in ancient times. The ruler could decide their life and death, but the ruler could also kill the ruler. There was no such thing as favoritism. It was nothing more than selling oneself to the royal family. They were slaves of the organization and received glory and wealth. Not to mention, he had to study hard before to be able to compete for power in the imperial court. Some people didn't even have the right to participate in this power game. Forget it, I'm scared. I'm scared. I won't tangle with people who aren't clear-headed. Greedy Wolf moved away from Ning Shu. Ning Shu smirked and said, be loyal to the organization. Don't overthrow the organization. Ning Shu clenched his fist and cheered him on. Do your best. Shine for the organization. Don't be so selfish. Be united and protect the organization. Greedy Wolf. Are you stupid? What does the organization have to do with me? Ning Shu. Ning Shu said, then why did you have to overthrow the organization? I thought you were going to establish a new one. I only established an organization because I ate too much. Even if a single mission taker is born in a plane, there will still be hundreds of millions of people. Even if one of them dies or encounters an accident, the ones who die will still be the minority. Even if many die, new mission takers will immediately take their place. Basically, the number of mission takers is constant. Where there are people, there will be conflicts. With such a large number of people, there must be many factions. They will fight with each other for resources. Overthrowing the organization is the slogan of our faction. If you want to form a faction, you have to have a core doctrine, right? You have to gather people into a huge group and form a force that can't be ignored. From there, you can compete with other factions for benefits. Ning Shu was speechless. Therefore, the slogan of overthrowing the organization was loud and clear. Those people are ignoring me because my group is too weak. They are treating me like a joke. Girl, we have to look through the surface to see the essence. I am shouting about overthrowing the organization, but I haven't done anything to harm the organization. The organization can't be bothered with the fights below. As long as there are people working, it's fine. It's nothing more than a fight for benefits. Ning Shu was speechless. So, you are the only one in the faction that overthrows the organization? There aren't many people who have entered the upper echelon competition. These people either have already joined a faction, or they're independent. I have to find a branch first and then develop it bit by bit. Although this faction is very young, its future is limitless. Ning Shu listened to Greedy Wolf while picking up the fragments. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a sharp female voice that interrupted his thoughts. He looked in the direction of the voice. Grand Uncle, you bastard. What right do you have to deduct the resources of Area B? A woman in purple emerged from the void. Her voice was heard before she arrived. Everyone saw a purple light flash by, and then a woman stood in front of Grand Uncle. The woman in purple wanted to reach out and grab Grand Uncle's collar, but she thought of something and resentfully put down her hand. She questioned with a cold face, "Why are the resources of Area B so much less this time?" "Ask the main system," Grand Uncle said coldly. The woman in purple was instantly furious. "The main system said that this is your decision. Find out who lost to you. Why are you making trouble with me?" Grand Uncle said. The woman in purple was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. "There aren't enough resources. What do you want me to do? I'm not doing it anymore." Grand Uncle sneered. "You're quite good at being unreasonable. Go find the main person." "Bastards. I was just a little late. Those bastards stole things behind my back." The woman in purple was speechless. She was aggrieved and angry. "There's nothing. What do you want me to do? I'm not doing it anymore. Don't come looking for me." Then, a purple light flashed and disappeared. Ning Shu looked at the place where the purple light disappeared and asked, "Who's that beauty? She couldn't have appeared in a place like this." Tan Lang said, "The person in charge of Area B. I guess the resources were stolen this time. She's angry. You don't know the composition of the organization?" Tan Lang looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu smiled. "I don't know. Who knows the rules of the game?" Tan Lang said, "If you join a faction, I'll be generous and tell you some things. There are so many planes and they are divided into 12 areas. A, B, C, D, E, E, G, X, 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 and X have their own leaders. An organization only has so many resources. If you have more of a pie, there will be fewer people. In order to compete for resources, whether it's for work or to become stronger, they have to compete. There are many generals like in he. Even if they compete for a little military funding, they will be angry. If there's less, there won't be enough to pay the people below. Like the army, it's also considered a faction. If the people above don't get enough merit points for various military equipment, how can they distribute it to the people below?" Ning Shu said, "I didn't know there was such a thing." Tan Lang was silent for a long time. Then, he turned his head and looked at Ning Shu in confusion. It was rare for him to be silent for so long. This time, Tan Lang didn't ask Ning Shu to join his organization. Instead, he asked, "Do you think that those generals in Anhe and the people in charge of the areas are all noble and aloof waiting for the organization to distribute resources while he only needs to be noble and aloof?" Chapter 31:20. If you don't ask for these things, they will be taken away by others. If you wait for people to come to you, you will only starve the people below you. Especially when there are many factions in the organization, they have to fight for the benefits of each other's groups. For a bit of resources, you will have to fight until your head bleeds. Just now, that lady was angry because her resources were taken away, but she couldn't do anything. Tan Lang was rarely serious. "Previously, I thought you had potential and wanted to absorb you into my faction. Now, it seems that it is indeed not suitable." Ning Shu curled his lips and asked, "Why is it not suitable?" "I am afraid that one day, when it is time to fight for benefits, you will cry at the negotiating table and say that you are all so cold and unreasonable. Wow, you are all so selfish. Maintain this young girl's heart." Tan Lang turned and left. It seemed that he had given up on the idea of absorbing Ning Shu into his faction. Ning Shu stuck out his tongue. He finally disgusted Tan Lang and left. He understood some of the inner workings of the organization. There were many factions. Just like now, the big shots around him might be from different factions. The organization did not care about these factions at all. According to Zheng Qing, this organization was like a toy. Since it was a toy, it could be destroyed when it was tired of playing with it. Ning Shu did not need to find a faction. How it was before, it was now the same as before. She would not die, so she did not care about these things. Even if this organization was destroyed, she would not die. When this sea of law dried up and died, a new sea of law would be born. As for whether Taishu and Jingqing died or not, it had nothing to do with her. She could leave the organization at any time. Now, she was doing missions, obtaining soul power, and trading fairly with the organization and the person who entrusted her. Her immortality was not given by the organization. Ning Shu suddenly wanted to go to the bugs to take a look. On the battlefield, he did not understand these bugs well enough. It was just that their vitality was quite tenacious, so he wanted to take a look. He did not know what latitude those bugs lived in. Eating planes was like eating cabbage. Ning Shu rested her chin on her hand as she controlled the vines. Her thoughts had already drifted far away. Hey! Someone greeted Ning Shu. Ning Shu turned around and saw that it was Ah Wan. Why was she here? Were there already rules so soon? You have a rule? Ning Shu asked. Ah Wan smiled. I was lucky. This was not luck. He felt that Ah Wan had just said that she wanted to make rules, and now she already had the rules. Ning Shu said, sit down. Did you come by yourself? Ah Wan nodded. There was probably only one person she knew here. Ah Wan sat beside Ning Shu. I didn't expect you to be here. Ning Shu only said, my footsteps are more messy, my walking pace is far from yours. Don't look at how they both stayed here, one had constructed her own space. As for her, she was the first to comprehend the laws. She could not do it herself and had to seek help from others. Ning Shu could not help but size Ah Wan up. 12 nomological imprints on her body. It felt like her entire body was covered in tattoos. Ah Wan saw that the others were picking up the shards and also picked up the bags to pick up the shards. Only then did she start picking up the shards. Ah Wan was having a hard time. You're quite comfortable like this. There are so many vines to pick up. Ah Wan said to Ning Shu. Ning Shu shook his head. I want to pick up 1,000,000. Ah Wan did not ask further and began to pick up the fragments. When she was tired, she could not help but say, I worked hard to become stronger. I thought there would be a different scenery, but in the end, this is what I'm doing. Very disillusioned. Ning Shu shrugged. Weak and simple jobs. Strong and difficult jobs. That was how it was. However, there was a girl who could talk, and a beautiful girl at that. Ning Shu was very happy. He could chat with her. When the grand-uncle finished dealing with the star stones, Ning Shu asked, do you have extra star stones? I'll buy them. Anyway, he had merit grains on him. They were all rewards for picking up fragments. After a long time, Ning Shu did not want to be stingy. Anyway, he had so much time to earn money for himself. Time was money. In the past, he had been stingy because he wanted to save up so that he could become stronger quickly and not die. Now that his wish had been fulfilled, he could relax. Grand-uncle, no. Since there was no more, Ning Shu did not ask anymore. He just picked up some scraps when the planes were fused. However, Ning Shu found that there were people competing for the scraps he picked up. They were the souls in military uniforms. Ning Shu could not help but ask if his army was really short of military funds. Well, now he had to pick up the scraps faster. It was so slow that he could not catch up with the hot ones even if he ate shit. Because of the competition, Ning Shu received very few star stones. It seemed that he still had to spend money to buy them. After the planes were stuck together, the grand-uncle said to Ning Shu, you changed shifts. Ning Shu, the main system hasn't notified me yet. The grand-uncle said, it will be notified soon. Then he left. After picking up the fragments, he dealt with the star stones. The most important thing was that he could not use money because his account was frozen. Of course, the main system sent a string of numbers to his account. He could only look and not use it. Ning Shu hurriedly called out to the grand-uncle. The grand-uncle stopped and turned to look at her. Is there anything else? Ning Shu asked, can you unfreeze my account? I can't use any money, and I can't spend any money. I can't use any of the money from handling the star stones and picking up the fragments. I have a problem with that. I can work, but I can't use money. He froze her account in a domineering manner. The grand-uncle just said, apply to the main system and then leave. Ning Shu reached out her hand. Wait. The grand-uncle, what's the matter? Ning Shu had a compassionate expression. The light of the Holy Mother enveloped her and her eyes were moist. I wonder how Jingqing is doing right now. I really want to see him. Please take me with you. Of course, I will process the star stones 10 times for free. If I don't see him, I will always be thinking about him. I can't eat well or sleep well. I have to see if he is doing well. After all, we have worked together for a long time. Ning Shu looked at the void at a 45-degree angle with sadness. The grand-uncle. Don't worry. He is doing well. Ning Shu shook her head wildly. No, no, no. I won't believe it if I don't see him doing well with my own eyes. If Jingqing was doing well, it would be a pity that she died once. She really wanted to go to Jingqing. Even if she couldn't do anything to him, she wanted to make him feel depressed. And she had a question to ask Jingqing. Jingqing had absorbed so many souls. Did the souls of those who had contact with Jingqing or those who had contact with her have been absorbed? Since it had been absorbed by Jingqing, it was certain that its soul had been destroyed. One soul might be weak, but many souls could still provide a lot of energy. Sand could form a tower. Chapter 31-21. In the plain, she had met some people by chance. Jingqing had absorbed so many souls. Her soul had been absorbed by Jingqing. She wondered if the souls of the people who had come into contact with her had also been absorbed. She must have done something to those people. There were some questions that had to be asked clearly in his heart. The grand-uncle sneered. You're not going to see him. You're going to hit him when he's down. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound and suddenly realized, so he was really caught. It seemed that he had really been pressed into the law of nothingness. How satisfying. Ning Shu shook his head and said seriously, I'm not going to hit him when he's down. I'm really going to visit him. How about I bring a bouquet of flowers? The grand-uncle raised his eyebrows. Why should I bring you? Ning Shu just said, this isn't a negotiation. Tell me your conditions. Forget it. I'm not going. Ning Shu waved his hand and went back to deal with the star stones. He didn't have to see Jingqing. He had already received the news that Jingqing had been filled into the law of nothingness. He couldn't absorb her soul anymore. No, he couldn't be bothered to go. If he dealt with the star stones for free 10 times, he would get 1 million merit points. 1 million merit points could be exchanged for 1,000 merit points. Even if he couldn't exchange for 1,000 merit points, he would still get more than 900. No, he wasn't going. Jingqing wasn't that shameless to waste his money just to see him once. Ning Shu picked up the tool to deal with the star stones and started scraping the star stones on the fragments. It was easier to deal with the star stones now. His soul wouldn't be hurt by the rebound power of the star stones. Especially now that his soul was so weak. The grand-uncle narrowed his eyes. You're the one who said you're going. You're the one who said you're not going. Ning Shu shrugged and didn't stop. At first, I wanted to do it for free. But after thinking about it, it wasn't worth it, so I didn't want to go. If he wanted to go, he would go. If he didn't want to go, he wouldn't go. Zheng Qin wouldn't be refined so easily. He just needed to see him before he died. There was no need to see him so early. Senior Grand Uncle, deal with star stones for free 1,000 times, and I'll take you there. 1,000 times would mean 100 million merit points. Seeing the principal minister once would cost 100 million merit points. If he couldn't afford to see the principal minister, 1,000 times would probably take a long time. Oh, I'm not going. I'm relieved to know that he's doing well. It doesn't matter whether I see him or not. Ning Shu refused directly. Xingqing's life and death had nothing to do with her. If Xingqing really did that, the matter would be irreparable. Spending 100 million to ask a question that would make him feel uncomfortable. She didn't want to do this kind of stupid thing. Moreover, Xingqing might not tell her the truth. She could do it 1,000 times for free, but Xingqing was not worth it. He was covered in diamonds and looked expensive. When you go, help me send a bouquet of flowers. Thank you. I'll give you the money later. Ning Shu stopped talking to the Grand Elder and focused on handling the star stones. Senior Uncle Tai wasn't a person who bargained with others. When he heard Ning Shu's refusal, he disappeared and left. Ning Shu sped up handling the star stones and then asked the system to apply to unfreeze his account. Handling the star stones hurt his soul, but the money he earned couldn't be used. It deliberately made him feel suffocated. It wanted the horse to run and didn't eat grass. The backup system said to Ning Shu, the main system said that it can't be unfrozen immediately. Please wait patiently. Ning Shu, next time, he would still pick up fragments. The customer who picked up the fragments would at least give him real money and merit grains that he could hold in his hand. It wasn't a string of numbers that couldn't be used. Ah Wan walked to Ning Shu and asked, not only are you picking up fragments, but you're also handling here. Ning Shu smiled at Ah Wan and said, this isn't a good job. It hurts the soul. I'd rather pick up fragments. It was Ah Wan's first time picking up fragments. She looked a little tired and sat down. Why are there so many fragments? You'll get used to it. She also felt that it was hard to bear. She had a star stone that supported her to comprehend merit. She thought that she could get some star stones if she came to pick up fragments. She got some scraps and realized her dream. Plus, she bought star stones and got the law of nothingness of the peerless martial arts. There was no compulsory work before. Now there is such a compulsory work. Sigh, Ah Wan shook her head. In the past, other than doing tasks, she could do whatever she wanted. Now, when she had free time, someone urged her to complete the volunteer activities. No big boss is willing to do it if it's not compulsory. Anyway, you're a big boss now. Just treat it as a sweet trouble, Ning Shu said. Ah Wan just smiled and shook her head. Standing outside the wall, I thought it was better inside the wall. Now I think it's better outside the wall. The wall has a big restriction. Small shrimp and small fish can't make any waves. Only big guys can make waves. It's normal. Ning Shu changed the topic. How much have you picked up? Not much. I didn't expect the bit wall to be so heavy. Ah Wan shook her head. Ning Shu asked, last time you said there was a world of nothingness that could strengthen the soul. What kind of world is there? What can strengthen the soul? Her soul was weak now. Although she didn't die, she was always like a ghost, appearing and disappearing as if she was going to disappear. Ah Wan glanced at Ning Shu's soul. There are fruits and treasures in the world of nothingness that can strengthen the soul. But these things are hard to find. After all, some worlds of nothingness don't even have living creatures. It's impossible to give birth to things related to the soul. You have to ask the elders. Also, you should strengthen the toughness of your soul. No matter how high the sand pile is, it won't be able to stand after being washed by water. But if you mix water with some withered grass, the molding effect will be better and tougher. Ah, Wan smiled. It seems that your soul often gets into trouble. Ning Shu nodded. Thank you. There are some things that I'm ignorant about. Ah, Wan said, it'll get better after a while. I'm telling you this to return the favor. I heard that the fire pearl at the auction house was sold at a high price of 30 million. I took advantage of it. Ning Shu just said, the price was inflated. It can't be sold at that price now. It was just a coincidence. Oh right, when are we free? Let's go to the world of nothingness to look for treasures. Ning Shu wanted to get Ah Wan to join him. It was more interesting to have a familiar pretty sister join him than to team up with a stranger. It seemed that he wouldn't die now, no matter what kind of dangerous situation he encountered. But the problem was that he had no money. He had to get someone to join him. We'll see. Ah Wan didn't reject him immediately. Ning Shu processed the star stones while thinking about what world to buy from the elders. The star stones were quickly processed. Now he had to melt the star stones. Chapter 31-22. After the star stone melted, the plane had to be connected as quickly as possible. When one was done, the main system would send the space node of the damaged plane and rush to the next one. Ning Shu had been dealing with it for a long time. Although the damage was small now, she still felt tired. She told the main system that she needed someone to take over. She had done enough. But the main system asked her to continue. It couldn't find a successor for the time being. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. She felt that the star stone was a trap. She couldn't find a successor. The main system couldn't wait for her to keep doing it. Everyone kept a respectful distance from this job. Ning Shu also felt that it was boring. She couldn't get the star stone. She couldn't be greedy at all. Who knew if the star stone would be less? If it was less, she had to adjust the inventory. It was so troublesome. There were still people competing for the scraps. The most painful thing in life was that you couldn't get what you wanted. Only when you lost it would you know how to cherish it. There was no successor. With so many people waiting, she couldn't just wait without doing anything. There were still many broken places waiting to be dealt with. Ning Shu could only keep doing it. Ah Wan had collected 100,000 fragments and left. She was still dealing with the star stone. Could someone take over? She had to do missions to get soul power. She had to go to the void world to find treasures that could strengthen the soul. Why wasn't senior uncle here to take over? Next time, she wouldn't deal with this. She would just pick up the fragments. Ning Shu shook her arms. It was tiring to keep repeating the action. Although the star stone's damage to the soul was reduced, it was still harmful after a long time. Ning Shu sat down and rested. She stretched out a vine the size of a thumb and wrapped it around the item. Another vine wrapped around the star stone. It was too tiring to deal with it by hand. She tried to control the vines. Her spiritual power was a little stronger now, but it hadn't taken shape yet. The formation of spiritual power determined the height of future development. Of course, the larger the capacity, the better. Ning Shu slowly used the vines to deal with the star stone, but the result wasn't so pleasant. The vines would be reflected by the star stone's power and bounce back onto Ning Shu's body. It actually hurt a little. The mark between her thumb and forefinger was very painful. This was a damage imprint. It seemed that it was impossible to use the vines and external forces. If possible, the great uncles and he would not have personally gone to deal with it. If the vines could pick up the fragments, why couldn't they handle the star rocks? As Ning Shu processed the star stones, he also used the vines to process them. However, the vines were always repelled by the power of the star stones. Since it was the power of laws that picked up the fragments, and it was also the power of laws that handled the star stones, then it was also possible to attach the power of laws to the vines. Ning Shu touched the space between his eyebrows, but the power there didn't seem to be life anymore. It didn't produce the liquid of life anymore. It was difficult to draw this power to the vines. As Ning Shu pondered, he increased the speed at which he processed the star stones. Because he was almost done picking up the fragments, he was just waiting for her. Why hadn't they changed shifts yet? Why did they have to catch someone and tire him to death before stopping? Do you know what sustainable development is? In the world of the plane connection, Ning Shu immediately took the leftovers of the star stone, pushing away the other competitors. Competitors, Ning Shu ignored their gazes. The law of nothingness in the peerless martial arts was getting bigger, and required more star stones. The big shots around him changed wave after wave, but there was still no one to take over. Ning Shu felt that regardless of whether it was picking up fragments or processing the star stones, he was the type that had a hard time. He was the type that was squeezed dry. If she really couldn't do it, she would just leave the organization and jump ship. Even if she didn't do anything, she would just squat in the void, day after day, night after night, she could live forever. If nothing went wrong, she would live longer than the sea of law. Now, she was not afraid of death at all. The organization gave her eternal life, but the prerequisite was that she had to be alive, and it was not easy to live in the organization. Since she was not afraid of death, she would not endure it and make herself unhappy. If she was still careful, afraid that she would say something wrong and cause others to be unhappy, then what was the point of her being strong? What was the point of being strong? If she was not going to die, was she going to be bullied forever? Thinking about it carefully, in the few hundred years in the organization, she was always on tenterhooks. If she was reincarnated, she should have reincarnated many times before finally disappearing. When she really did not want to live anymore, she could also annihilate her own personality and will. Death was not such a scary thing. Ning Shu informed the main system, "Hurry up and find someone to take over the shift, or else I won't do it anymore. I have already done it for so long, I should let people rest a little. If they dry vomit, I won't want to do it anymore. If you don't say it, people will think that you are not tired and let you work harder." Hoping for others to take pity on you, it was basically a dream. If you don't say it, and then you cry out in grievance, people will only spit on your face. If you have something to say, then say it. Now that you are tired, you don't want to do it anymore. After a while, Ning Shu dealt with a few more damaged areas, and the people who took over the shift finally came. It was Uncle Feng and then he. Ning Shu put down the tool in her hand and stepped aside. Thinking about it, she had almost dealt with 50 areas. In her impression, she had been dealing with this thing non-stop. If she had a body, she should have cervical spondylosis by now. Uncle Feng smiled and said to Ning Shu, "Your face has recovered very well." Ning Shu touched her face. Her eldest uncle's words reminded her of the incident where her head had exploded. "Yes. Fortunately, it is as beautiful as before," Ning Shu said with a smile. "Your soul is so weak. Do you want soul power?" Uncle Ning Shu asked. Ning Shu glanced at him. "If you have something to say, just say it. I really don't like to deal with this kind of non-technical and repetitive work. In exchange, how about I help you get some soul power?" Uncle Ning Shu said. Ning Shu knew that these big shots had resources in their hands. They could get soul power that was not available on the market. Ning Shu said indifferently, "Then how do you want to trade?" Uncle Feng asked, "Then how do you want to trade? Is the soul power pure?" Ning Shu asked. If he did not trade with some impure soul power, he might as well do missions. Uncle Feng said, "Of course it is pure." Ning Shu said, "Oh." His expression did not change at all. He did not show any interest in the thing. Oh, she didn't say anything else, making it difficult for Uncle Zhang to continue the conversation. Do you want to trade? I want to see the soul power. He had to check the goods first. And he said from the side, if the main system finds out that you are selling soul power, you will be in trouble. Uncle Feng said, if you don't say it, I don't say it, and she doesn't say it, who else will know? Although we are not allowed to trade openly, the amount is small and private. It doesn't matter. Uncle Feng took out 2 bottles of soul power. They were not big, only the size of yogurt. Chapter 31-23. Inside the condoms was a water-like soul power, and it swayed like water in the condoms. Ning Shu almost couldn't stop himself from swallowing, but his expression was still noble and cold. He wasn't tempted by the soul power at all. 2 condoms. How about you take my shift? Uncle Chang shook the condoms, his voice full of temptation. These 2 condoms can make your soul power much more condensed. Ning Shu said indifferently, how many people are willing to provide soul power for this? There had to be a standard to measure whether it was worth it or not. About 10 condoms. Anyway, it will only be more and not less, Uncle Chang said. Okay. Ning Shu nodded furiously in his heart, but on the surface, he nodded coldly and said, 3 condoms. Uncle Chang shook his head. This soul power can't be bought even if you buy it. Ning Shu said, then find someone else to take your shift. Girl, I only have 2 condoms. 2 condoms, Uncle Chang said. Ning Shu's expression was reluctant. Okay, 2 condoms it is. He took the condoms. I'll take your shift. Uncle Chang smiled and said, then do your best. Good luck. After saying that, he left. Ning Shu immediately opened the condoms and took a sip of the soul power. He immediately felt a cool sensation in his throat, and there was power in it. Ning Shu immediately felt his soul brimming with power. He took small sips. It was like drinking water, tasteless. In the end, he finished the 2 condoms. His soul became a bit stronger, and his soul became clearer. Very good. Ning Shu squatted down to process the star rock. And he moved to the side and also processed the star rock. And he was probably a bit poor. He didn't take out anything to exchange with Ning Shu. Instead, he chose to process the star rock. It seemed that everyone wasn't just poor. Ning Shu was still trying to use the vines to process the star rock. Even if the vines couldn't process the star rock, they could still move the fragments in front of him. He only needed to scrape the star rock. Then the vines would throw the fragments to the side, and a new one would be placed in front of him. It was better than moving the star stones himself. It was much easier. Not only did he have to deal with these star stones, but he also had to deal with the star stones on the bit wall. If he didn't clean up the bit wall, it wouldn't be easy to stick them together. The 2 of them silently processed the star stones. Ning Shu was fully immersed in how to use the vines to process the star stones. On the other hand, his expression was indifferent. His military uniform made him look cold and hard, completely different from his usual flowery shirt. The other party kept her at arm's length, and Ning Shu would not go up to him to talk. The 2 of them dealt with the star stones very quickly. After they were done with the star stones, they still hadn't finished picking up the fragments in the area. Ning Shu stretched out his vines and picked up the fragments around him and threw them into the bag. 1 fragment was worth 1 merit point. Picking up 1 fragment would earn her 1 merit point. Someone would definitely buy it from her. And he glanced at the lively Ning Shu, who was still in the mood to pick up the fragments after dealing with the star stones. Then he asked the warehouse to send some star stones over. There weren't enough star stones this time. After a while, a soldier came to deliver the star stones. Ning Shu saw Mo Ming and immediately greeted him. Here to deliver the star stones. How have you been recently? Mo Ming put down the bag and said, not bad. Pretty good. The life of a soldier was actually very simple. Mo Ming told Ning Shu that he was doing very well. Ning Shu saw that the badge on his chest had changed again. There was an additional bar. You've been promoted again. Congratulations, congratulations. Since he was promoted, his salary would definitely be higher. These soldiers all had a basic salary. Mission takers would only have soul power when they completed missions. Mo Ming smiled and said, I'm just lucky. Mo Ming had a soaring purple fate. He was the kind of person who was very lucky. Ning Shu wasn't surprised that he had been promoted. Not only did he have soaring purple fate, but he also had the golden light of merit. When mixed together, it could almost blind Ning Shu's eyes. These soldiers would build golden bodies of merit. Just like skeletons, the merit would make their souls more resilient and protect them from other injuries. Ning Shu felt that the creation of the golden body of merit was the same as working hard on the immortal body, creating an immortal body with extremely strong defensive capabilities. The amount of merit points needed would be huge. Mission takers couldn't build golden bodies of merit. After all, an ordinary person's body couldn't carry so much merit points. Mo Ming put down the bag and left with a few soldiers. Ning Shu said to He, now, let's melt the star stones. He nodded. Then let's melt them. The two of them worked together to melt the star stones. Then they connected the planes. He watched the melting process. Ning Shu ran to pick up the leftovers of the star stones. Just like that, they dealt with the star stones. During this time, Ning Shu and He didn't say a word. They stayed silent and did their own things. They worked together for the next step. Because she had obtained 2 large amounts of soul power, Ning Shu hummed a little tune while melting the star stones. This soul power was equivalent to her completing 20 missions. She hoped that the next time someone asked her to take over, she would give them all the soul power. He glanced at Ning Shu, who was humming. Can you be quieter? Oh, Ning Shu replied. She lowered her voice and hummed softly. Ning Shu said, don't tell me you're tired of doing it. So you're here to find someone to vent your anger on. Ning Shu said, do you have soul power? If you do, I can take over for you. No. Ning Shu looked at her sympathetically. Now I believe Tan Lang's words. You're really poor. He grinned. You're the same. You're not a nouveau riche. Ning Shu said, I like it when you call me a nouveau riche. Wasn't it just some stinky money? What a nice compliment. But now, she didn't even have that stinky money. Even if I had soul power, I wouldn't trade with you. Wouldn't it be better to give her soul power to her soldiers? Ning Shu said calmly, don't worry. I didn't say that I had to force you to take over for me. Ning Shu spoke as he processed the star stones. Seeing that He's processing speed had slowed down, he didn't say anything. She had processed so many star stones before, and she had to take over for her uncle. She was also very tired. Now, she just hoped that someone would take over for her. Then, this transaction would be considered complete. Rumble, rumble. Suddenly, the planes began to explode one after another. There was no warning at all, and the living beings inside did not move. Because it happened so suddenly, no one expected it. Including the planes that the army was dragging, they exploded one by one. The huge force annihilated the army near the planes. They were extinguished together with the creatures in the planes. Just like dominoes, if one were to fall, the other behind would all fall apart. The firecrackers were lit. Only when all of them exploded would they stop. Chapter 31-24. What's going on? And his face was gloomy. The big shots who were picking up the fragments also gathered. They were clearly controlling it well. Why did it suddenly explode? Who knew what was going on with these planes? Nothing might have happened before, and there were no cracks, but they suddenly exploded. Now it was obvious that the planes were collapsing, and if they couldn't be controlled, it would be like setting off firecrackers. All the planes might be in trouble. After all, the planes were connected. In an instant, the world and the creatures in the world were annihilated. Now I have to cut off this collapse. If the firecrackers were torn apart, the firecrackers behind them wouldn't explode. And he condensed a sword in his hand and rushed directly to the place where the planes had exploded. He wanted to cut off the connection between the planes. However, the power of the plane's collapse was very strong. It was like a storm. Ordinary people would be directly annihilated by this power. And his military uniform fluttered in the wind. The military cap on his head was also blown away. He held the sword and slashed at the plane. The collapse was right in front of him. Besides there were a few big shots helping. Some of the weaker ones couldn't withstand the power generated by the plane's collapse. It was so dangerous to pick up fragments and deal with star stones. Ning Shu condensed a sword in his hand. He walked over and slashed at the connection between the planes. The sword condensed the will of death. When it slashed at the plane, it made the plane creak. Soon, the explosion was coming. Ning Shu condensed the sword in his hand and slashed at the plane. The plane hadn't fallen off yet. He felt so fucked up. He hoped that the plane would be fine, but in the end, it was very easy for the plane to fall off. Now, he tried his best to make the plane fall off, but he couldn't get it off. Boom, boom. The explosion was right in front of him. Ning Shu felt that his soul was penetrated by gusts of astral wind. He didn't die after all. The few big shots couldn't withstand the astral wind generated by such an explosion. They said to He, "Let's retreat. Quickly inform the grand uncle to come back." And he felt that he was fucked up. The consequences were serious. The resources in his hands would definitely be deducted. Moreover, the grand uncle might not be able to come back immediately. Fuck. And he didn't say anything. He condensed an even bigger weapon and slashed at the plane. Everyone else left. Ning Shu felt that it was really not easy to fill in for them. Ning Shu held the sword like an ant holding a toothpick. It was impossible for her to break open a big coconut. She had no idea how she could do it. Crack. The giant sword looked at the plane, and cracks appeared on the star stone in the middle. Ding, ding, ding. Ning Shu swung his sword in a circle and slashed at the plane as if he was forging iron. In addition, and he was not weak. The plane finally fell off. And he kicked the plane, pushing it further away to prevent the surrounding planes from being affected by the explosion. Boom. The plane that had fallen off exploded. Waves of astral winds blew over and exploded in the void. It was as if the scene had been slowed down. It was like an atomic bomb exploding. It was as beautiful as fireworks. But these plane fragments rained down like a rain of bullets. Ning Shu quickly hid behind He and used He's body as a shield. "Oh my God, you scared me to death. Don't hurt my beautiful face." These fragments brushed past her face, leaving no trace. And he didn't say anything. She waited for the astral winds to gradually disappear before letting people pick up the fragments. "Why are you hiding?" "It's over," and he said. Ning Shu patted her chest. "That was too scary. I almost got hit in the face by the fragments." And his expression was a bit indescribable. Ning Shu said, "I like my face, just like how you like to wax your hair." And he glanced at her. Can you be more serious during work hours? I didn't do anything to you. How am I not serious? Ning Shu felt that it was really strange. These people either accused her of being petty or indecent. She was a poor little white rabbit. She had one label after another on her head. That was a capital injustice. If you don't like her, then so be it. I don't care what you think of me. There were many people who didn't like her. Come and kill me. Ning Shu stretched out her vines to pick up the fragments. There were so many broken fragments. She was going to make money. And he rubbed between her eyebrows and began to let people count the broken planes. Generally, if there was a large-scale break in his jurisdiction, it was because he didn't control it well. That was his responsibility. If he didn't take measures, he didn't know how many more would break. He probably wouldn't have the resources next time. And he glanced at Ning Shu, who was stretching out her vines to pick up the fragments while touching her face. She could actually withstand the astral winds and didn't die. She cooperated with her to cut open the plane. Little girl, give me 5 bags of fragments, a big boss Ning Shu said. Ning Shu immediately handed him 5 bags of fragments. Merit grains. The other party gave her a bag of merit grains. Ning Shu took it and said with a smile, "Thank you for taking care of business." She looked like a money grubber. It was necessary to continue investigating this person. Ning Shu turned to look at He. Why did he keep looking at her? What are you looking at? Do you also think that I'm beautiful? And he looked away. Ning Shu hurriedly collected the extra star stone fragments. These planes were already broken, but there were a lot of extra star stones. He was rich. Ning Shu used her vines to wrap around the fragment that was embedded with the star stone, and then put it in her own space. It was not in vain that his hand was split open by the rebounding force of the plane. He held a huge sword and cut the plane. His soul still hadn't digested the huge force. Ning Shu used her vine tentacles to pull the star stone fragments in front of her and put them away. This would last her for a long time. And he didn't say anything. It was just a few star stones. Compared to his resources, this was not even a drop in the ocean. He gave her some benefits as a thank you for helping this time. Ning Shu hummed a little tune and put away the star stones. He said to He, "What do we do next?" And he said, "Let's take care of things here first." Ning Shu nodded and continued to pull the star stones. There were so many star stones. After taking care of things here, they rushed to the next place. And he glanced at Ning Shu and asked, "With the strength of your soul, you shouldn't be able to resist the astral wind, right?" After getting so many star stones and soul power, Ning Shu was in a good mood. He said, "Maybe I'm talented." And he didn't take Ning Shu's boasting to heart. She continued to deal with the star stones. Ning Shu asked, "So many planes collapsed. Are you going to be unlucky?" And she was in a bad mood. Could he not mention it? Ning Shu said, "The collapse was very sudden. The creatures in those planes didn't move. Will you be unlucky?" Chapter 31:25. And his ears were filled with the words, "You'll be unlucky." He was too lazy to argue with her. And he stayed away from Ning Shu to deal with the star stone. "Hey, Grand Uncle is back. You can finally change shifts." Ning Shu immediately threw away the item in his hand. When Grand Uncle came over, he said, "Judge, let me tell you. After you left, thousands of planes collapsed. Revenge breeds revenge. When will you report me?" "I'll report you." And he looked up at Ning Shu and twitched the corner of his mouth. "What the fuck? Thousands?" Senior Grand Elder glanced at He indifferently and then looked at Ning Shu, sizing her up. Privately trading soul power? Ning Shu looked down at his soul. It was much better than before. He shook his head calmly and said, there was no trade. Someone gave it to me. Giving a gift doesn't count as a trade. And he wanted to speak, but Ning Shu glanced at him. And he snorted but didn't speak. 100 times as punishment, Granduncle said lightly. Ning Shu didn't care. It was just 100 times. It was so easy. He was too lazy to argue with him. Even if he argued, he wouldn't be able to find any reason. He had dealt with more than 100 times, including the ones he had taken over for Uncle Chang. And he snorted. If you didn't go to Granduncle and say bad things about me, he wouldn't have noticed that your soul was strange. You lifted a stone only to drop it on your own foot. Ning Shu looked at he in surprise and stared. I find that you really don't know how to be kind. I'm helping you. First, try to exaggerate the situation. When he saw the data, it was a good situation if there were less than 1,000. And should I thank you? Ning Shu waved his hand and hid his merit. No need. We meet often. Saying thank you is too estranged. You don't have to be so polite. You're too polite. And you're so happy just because of this. And he was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. Only villains and women were difficult to deal with. Indeed, it was like this. Even if there was no reason, he could still make it seem reasonable. Only a strong, iron-willed straight man like he could do this. If it were an ordinary man, he would have been in despair. Ning Shu stretched. I'm leaving. I'm too tired. Goodbye. Oh right, Ning Shu looked at senior uncle, you went to see Jingqing, right? I asked you to send a bouquet of flowers. Did you send it? How much is it? I'll transfer the money to you. Oh, my account is frozen. I can't use it. 1 merit grain will do. 1,000 merit grains can buy a lot of flowers. Keep the change, Ning Shu said to the Grand Elder. Ning Shu took out a merit grain from the little sunny egg and handed it to the Grand Uncle. He then asked, Jingqing, did you miss me? And he was speechless. She looked very happy with her mischievous actions. The Grand Elder looked at the merit grain in Ning Shu's hand. The merit grain was brighter than gold. It was especially shiny and looked very rich. The Grand Elder put on a pair of gloves and took the merit grain from Ning Shu's hand. He didn't touch Ning Shu's soul at all. He was just short of raising his orchid finger. Ning Shu asked expectantly, did Jingqing mention me? The Grand Elder said, who told me you went to see Jingqing? I thought you guys would be playing in the pool of the law of nothingness. You really didn't go to see Jingqing. When are you going to see him? When will you bring a bouquet of flowers? Ning Shu patted his butt and left. The Grand Elder casually threw a merit grain to he. Your strength should be improved. So many planes have collapsed this time. And he directly melted the merit grain. The merit grain entered his palm and integrated into his soul. I didn't collapse 1,000 planes. Not even 1/10 of 1,000. Grand Elder, the situation of the planes is getting worse and worse. These planes suddenly exploded without any warning. This kind of situation couldn't be prevented. This wasn't a problem of his strength, but that the planes had gone crazy without any warning. Of course, this was because the planes were sick. To be precise, something had happened to the source law C. The Grand Elder didn't speak. His expression was indifferent as he began to process the star stones. Ning Shu returned to the system space through the space channel. He clicked on the chat system and contacted the Grand Elder to ask how much soul power he had. If the Grand Elder had soul power, he wanted to make a deal with him. The Grand Elder said that he didn't have any. It wasn't easy to get some soul power. Although it was euphemistic, Ning Shu understood that the Grand Elder had rejected the deal. Ning Shu didn't care. Anyway, he had already obtained a part of the soul power. He could slowly complete missions with the rest of the soul power. Ning Shu patted his purse. In the purse were the merit grains he had earned this time. He would take them to the skeletons to eat. After cultivating the skeletons, he could be lazy and didn't have to do everything. Ning Shu entered the second reincarnation world. A small pit had formed. It was the size of 2 palms and there was less than a handful of water inside. The rebirth pool was slowly evolving. It seemed that the reincarnation world also needed soul power. He just didn't know if the rebirth pool in the first reincarnation world could provide this energy. Ning Shu looked at the rebirth pool quietly. He wasn't in a hurry to let the rebirth pool form quickly. After all, no soul would enter this world. It was better to evolve slowly. She could evolve however she wanted. She could evolve as long as she wanted. She had plenty of time to wait. Ning Shu went to the place where the skeletons were stationed. He found that each skeleton had more or less golden merit light. The difference was that some skeletons had darker colors, while others had lighter colors. Ning Shu walked over. When Zhu Jun saw Ning Shu, he waved his hand. "Boss, over here." At the same time, a group of people walked over and surrounded Ning Shu. They surveyed Ning Shu with all sorts of strange gazes. For some skeletons, this was the first time they were seeing Ning Shu. Most probably, they had heard many people talking about Ning Shu. At this moment, all the skeletons surveyed Ning Shu from top to bottom. Ning Shu took out the little sunny pouch. "There are merit grains inside. I think you guys have done a good job. Pay more attention to the rebirth pool in case something runs out." "You still don't know?" "Yes." The skeletons replied in unison. They stared at the pouch in Zhu Jun's hand. Zhu Jun asked, "Why is it mandarin ducks playing in the water?" Zhu Jun looked at the embroidery on the pouch and asked. After that, he exclaimed in surprise and used a strange gaze to stare at Ning Shu. Ning Shu was speechless. This was what it was when it was sold. Who cared about what was embroidered on it? Moreover, Ning Shu felt that the person who made this item had a bad taste. It was the same as his eldest uncle. Zhu Jun whispered to Ning Shu, "Pippy Shu, when are you going to the world? Bring me along. I heard that the 9-Palace Mountain is a world." Ning Shu glanced at him. "Who told you that? Who told you that the 9-Palace Mountain is a world? There are clearly 9 worlds." Zhu Jun was speechless. He couldn't reply to this. Chapter 31-26. I asked Li Si about it. "Isn't Li Si a native?" Zhu Jun asked in anticipation. "When are you going to 9-Palace Mountain?" Ning Shu said, "Aren't you in 9-Palace Mountain now? This is the first level of 9-Palace Mountain." She would not go to 9-Palace Mountain for no reason. 9-Palace Mountain also had a plain wall. If she entered it frequently, it might cause great harm to the world. Ning Shu did not want 9-Palace Mountain to explode in the world of reincarnation. The huge explosion would definitely tear the world of reincarnation apart. In the future, she would not even have a place to rest. Zhu Jun said, "I want to go to the human world." Ning Shu nodded. Speaking of which, he had already gone to the 5th level of 9-Palace Mountain. He did not know what the 6th level was like. He would not go in for the time being. 9-Palace Mountain was here anyway. He would fill up his soul first. "When I go to the human world, I will think of you first." Ning Shu reached out and patted Zhu Jun's shoulder. It was quite hard and glowed with golden light. What a handsome skeleton. Zhu Jun did not believe Pippy Shu's words at all. Not at all. Ning Shu thought of the earthworm. He asked Li Si for the Book of Life and Death to check it out. He did not know if the Book of Life and Death had souls that entered the world of reincarnation. What a good-for-nothing. Why didn't he run when he could not beat him? Did he think he was like Yilin who could not be killed? What a dream! Could it be that the earthworm was too fat so he could not drill into the ground? If that was the case, then he deserved it. Why did he have to eat so much? Perhaps the earthworm did not change his diet at all. Since Yilin had started to make soul fluid, it did not make sense that the earthworm would not eat soul fluid. Moreover, after consuming the soul fluid, the venom extracted from the earthworms was a great killing weapon. A single bite could contaminate one's body and soul, turning one into a mentally retarded existence. The earthworm was quite afraid of death. To be honest, Ning Shu did not believe that the earthworm would die just like that. Perhaps she was hiding in the ground. Yilin said she was dead. Thinking about Liren all day long, earthworm hadn't even seen Liren yet, so how could he bear to die? Ning Shu quickly flipped through the Book of Life and Death and asked Li Si, does the Book of Life and Death record all the souls in the world of samsara? I didn't investigate this, but it should be recorded. When souls jump into the lake of life, I ask for their names and then look for their names in the Book of Life and Death. Anyway, I can find them. Perhaps there are some wandering souls without consciousness that are not recorded in the records. After all, wandering souls didn't even know who they were. They didn't have any thoughts or memories. They were just thin souls floating around. How could the Book of Life and Death record them? Ning Shu flipped through the Book of Life and Death. He didn't know what was added to the earthworm. It seemed to be a soul worm. Ning Shu pulled out the soul of the soul stone. There weren't many of them. Even though there were images, Ning Shu could tell at a glance that these soul worms weren't earthworms. Did the earthworm not die, or did it reincarnate? Ning Shu asked Li Si if he saw any earthworm-like worms jumping into the lake of life. Earthworms were mutated soul worms. Soul worms were used to find soul stone mines. They were used by humans to find soul stone mines. Earthworms were intelligent. Intelligent creatures were first recorded in the Book of Life and Death. If there was no record in the Book of Life and Death, it meant that the earthworm wasn't dead. Then why did Yilin say that the earthworm was dead? She summoned the earthworm at that time, but it didn't respond. Could it be that it was too far away, so the earthworm didn't hear it? Ning Shu didn't want to go to the second world. His disciples seemed to have turned evil. He changed from a soul protector to a person who made soul fluid. If the heavens wanted people to die, they first had to make people crazy. If Yilin wasn't discovered, then it would be fine. If he was discovered, then those righteous sects would definitely exterminate him. Moreover, his disciples were all lucky. If a person wanted to be famous, it was nothing more than eliminating evil and defending the righteous path. Either he was a great demon king and everyone was afraid of him, or he rebelled against his sect, especially when his master was a great demon. What a dramatic situation. Ning Shu had a feeling that the heavenly Tao of that world had given up on Yilin. If Yilin was fine, he would become an existence that was admired. After all, his disciples were all people with luck. It was enough to make this sect famous. And as the master of these people, Yilin would also become an existence that was admired. Even if he wasn't strong enough, he would be praised as a great disciple. Moreover, Yilin's strength wasn't bad. But if he wasn't a righteous person and was a thief, it was enough to make these disciples rebel against the sect. It seemed like it was because of Bai Cc that Yilin took such a risk. Bai Cc said that she had implicated Yilin. Bai Cc probably wouldn't let him off. Everyone was the same. A crow shouldn't call a pig black. Falling into the devil's path for love sounded very interesting. Bai Cc probably wouldn't think that she had implicated Yilin. Anyway, Yilin's good days were coming to an end. Maybe he would be killed and come to the world of samsara. At that time, they could still talk about the old days. She should ask Yilin where the earthworm had gone. Compared with Yilin, this cheap disciple, who was a bit fake, she valued the chubby earthworm more. It was more comfortable to quarrel with the earthworm every day than to get along with Yilin. Ning Shu flipped through the life and death book. Finally, her eyes stopped at Yilin's name. She was still talking about the old days with Yilin. She didn't expect to see Yilin's name. Moreover, the life and death book recorded Yilin's death in detail. He might have recorded more things than ordinary people because he used to be the son of the natural law. Similar to what Ning Shu thought, Yilin was really besieged and killed by the famous decent sections. At the critical moment, it was his disciples who stabbed him in the back. After killing their own master, the sect was disbanded. The disciples also went away. When strength was respected, a master who taught them was more important than their parents, because the master's teaching could make them stronger and change their fate. Killing a master was a despicable thing. These disciples killed their own masters. Ordinary decent sects couldn't tolerate them. Ning Shu pointed at Yilin's name, and then looked for Bai Cici's name. If Bai Cici also died, they could really be a pair of dead mandarin ducks on the road to the netherworld, a ghost couple. But Ning Shu didn't find Bai Cici's name after searching for a while. This meant that Bai Cici either didn't die, or her soul was held and couldn't come to the world of samsara. This was a bit sad. They couldn't be together when they were alive, and they couldn't be together when they died. Sometimes the natural law was so cruel. Ning Shu said to Li Si, "Call Zhu Jun here. I have work to do." Li Si stood up and went to find Zhu Jun. After a while, Zhu Jun came. Ning Shu pointed at Yilin's appearance in the life and death book and said, "This person is in the world of samsara. Bring him here. Don't kill him. I have something to ask him." Chapter 31-27. Ning Shu used vines to make a stool and sat down to wait. Zhu Jun's black eyes stared at Yilin's appearance on the Book of Life and Death. Without eyes, Ning Shu didn't know what he was using to see. Zhu Jun asked, "Can I take this book away and show it to everyone?" Li Si reflexively stopped him. "There are so many skeletons. What if they break it?" Li Si had developed feelings for the Book of Life and Death. He was worried that these careless skeletons would break the Book of Life and Death. Ning Shu handed the Book of Life and Death to Zhu Jun. "It's not that fragile. If it was so easy to break, it wouldn't be a natural treasure nurtured by the heavenly Tao." Zhu Jun took the Book of Life and Death and said to Li Si, "Don't worry. I promise to bring it back safely." Li Si looked at the Book of Life and Death in Zhu Jun's hands as if Zhu Jun was holding a fragile baby. He reminded him again and again, "You have to be careful. Don't let anyone tear it." Zhu Jun turned and left. Ning Shu supported his chin and looked at the pool of rebirth. He looked at the various mirages created by the pool of rebirth. When Ning Shu stared at them, Ning Shu's relatives appeared. They were trying to tempt Ning Shu to jump in. Ning Shu sighed. If she jumped in, the pool of rebirth would be the first to collapse. The pool of rebirth would definitely die before her. These things couldn't tempt her. She would go back and comprehend the spatial laws later. While picking up the fragments and processing the star stones, she would look for the plane where she was born. It wasn't easy to find a person in a sea of people, let alone in so many planes. Ning Shu didn't dare to calculate the probability of finding her. Since the pool of rebirth was willing to make these illusions for her, she would look at them. It was good to see the faces of her relatives. After a long time, the faces, voices, and smiles of these people began to fade in her memory. She couldn't remember some of them. She only remembered who her relatives were. Zhu Jun led the 2,000 skeletons and started to look for people in the world of reincarnation. He divided these skeletons into several teams. Of course, there was a huge reward for finding the person. The pool of reincarnation probably felt that these things were unable to tempt Ning Shu, so it didn't bother to create a mirage, preventing Ning Shu from even looking at it. When he was bored, Ning Shu continued to expand his sea of consciousness. The more mental strength it contained, the greater the potential for mental strength to take shape. Ning Shu hoped that his spiritual sphere could form a vast and boundless starry sky. That way, when searching for people, his spiritual power could pour out and scan an entire plain. They didn't want to form rivers and lakes. After all, there was a limit to how much they could rise. Even if it was the sea, there would be a time when it ran out of water. It was a good thing that her spiritual power had yet to take shape. The longer she waited, the more she would be able to expand her sea of consciousness and accommodate more spiritual power. Since it was boring to wait for others, he might as well expand his sea of consciousness. Ning Shu turned the vines into a reclining chair. He lay on the chair and rocked back and forth. Ning Shu closed his eyes and was very relaxed. When he woke up, Yi Lin was still not found. The world of reincarnation was not small. It would be difficult to find him even if he wanted to hide. Ning Shu stretched and asked Li Si, "Have you found your young master?" The life and death book records very quickly. Souls with intelligence, regardless of whether they were humans or other creatures, were recorded. If there was no Pai Lupi's soul, then young Master Pai Lupi was either a 1,000-year-old tortoise who hadn't come to the world of reincarnation yet, or his soul had already dispersed. The first was still okay. If Li Si didn't encounter a huge external force, he wouldn't die. He could continue to wait. As for the second, Li Si wouldn't be able to wait even if he waited until the end of time. Li Si also understood this. It's a good thing that there is no record. At least there was something to think about. Ning Shu stood up and put away the vines. Since Yi Lin couldn't be found in a short time, she would first comprehend the law of space. The deeper the comprehension, the more planes she could jump in the future. Ning Shu didn't want to find Yi Lin by herself. Anyway, there were skeletons. Let these skeletons find him. If they could find him, they would find him. If they couldn't find him, they would slowly find him. As long as there was something to do, it was fine. She thought it would take some time. She didn't expect that Yi Lin would be found so soon. When he had a body, Yi Lin emitted black gas. Now that he didn't have a body, his soul was shrouded in black gas. This was caused by the unclean soul power. Li Si was stunned. He really looked like his young master. His young master was also covered in black gas. When Yi Lin saw Ning Shu, he was stunned. Just like when he was alive, Ning Shu cupped his hands and shouted, "Senior, why are you in this world?" After he was stabbed in the back by that rascal, he lost consciousness in a trance. When he woke up again, he was in a foggy world. There was no day or night in this world. It was always gray like this. Souls floated around him. Yi Lin understood. He had come to the legendary hell. Hell really existed. When people died, they really came to hell. When he saw his former master here, Yi Lin was very surprised. He always knew that his master was in a soul state, and his soul was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. But he didn't expect him to be someone from hell. Zhu Jun said to Ning Shu, "I've brought him here. It won't be long, right?" Ning Shu nodded. "It won't be long." Ning Shu looked at Yi Lin and asked, "I'll ask you again. Where did the earthworm go? It didn't come to this world. Is it dead? Alive? Or was it made into soul fluid by you?" Yi Lin didn't say anything. Ning Shu sat down. He didn't say anything and wasn't angry. He waited silently while cultivating his sea of consciousness. There were many skeletons around. They stared at Yi Lin with their black eyes. Although they didn't have eyes, Yi Lin felt uncomfortable when these eyes stared at him. Also, the golden light on these skeletons made him feel uncomfortable. When he got closer, his soul felt like it was being pricked by needles. Yi Lin planned to familiarize himself with this world. Since it was a soul world, he could probably cultivate. After all, his former master was also a soul. However, he didn't expect to be caught without any warning or reason. When he saw Ning Shu, Yi Lin felt like he had met an old friend in a foreign land. But the other party asked about the earthworm. Humans were worse than a small worm. Moreover, they seemed to be master and disciple. Yi Lin couldn't bear the pressure and said, "It's still alive." Ning Shu said, "Oh, then why did you say it was dead?" Yi Lin said, "Later on, it didn't want to follow me and disappeared. I don't know where it went. If you ask me, I can only say it's dead." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and looked at him. "Yi Lin, you're really interesting. What's wrong with saying it's alive? Why did you have to say it's dead?" The earthworm was probably living well in that world. Nothing else mattered. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.